Zoom hears it. Okay. Apologize for the delay. You should have audio now. Mrs. Earl, can you confirm if you can hear us?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. Sorry for the delay, folks.
All right. Thank you very much for your patience. Go ahead. My name is Diana Kirsch from Royersford. I'm speaking on agenda item 2B. I'd like to discuss the mental health repercussions affecting our children due to forced masking and COVID restrictions, in the hopes that as a district, we never make these mistakes again. These mental health issues that are in many ways yet to be fully realized. The messages being sent to children are that they are disease vectors, rather than beautiful, innocent children in need of full social interaction for proper development. Did you know that the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and the Children's Hospital Association have declared a youth mental health crisis in this country? If you want to be afraid of something, the following statistics from the CDC's Morbidity and Mortality report are what we should all be afraid of. Number one, at emergency rooms in 38 children's hospitals across the nation, the number of suicides and self-harm injury cases in the first 3 quarters of 2021 was 47% higher among 5 to 8-year-olds. It was 182% higher among 9 to 12-year-olds. There was a 22.3% spike in ER trips for potential suicides by children aged 12 to 17 in the summer of 2020 compared to 2019. That trend continued into 2021 academic year, which saw ER visits for suicide attempts up by 39.1% compared to 2020. The data was particularly alarming among girls aged 12 to 17. Between February and March of 2021, suicide attempts were up 50.6% compared to the same period in 2019. Since the board likes to hear from students to influence policy decisions, I'd like to quote a letter from a high school student named Mila before taking her own life 1 month before she would have graduated. Quote, "I just miss being able to see faces, to be able to stand next to someone and not to have to worry about being yelled at or told off, or being able to just walk down the streets of downtown Kingston with my friends and just see everyone doing normal things. I miss being able to just go out and do whatever you want without having to worry about restrictions or masks or gathering sizes or anything like that. Everyone is saying how we'll never have the old normal again, that we'll have a new normal. But to be frank, I don't want any part of what is going on in our world to be normal, because this isn't normal. Humans are social animals, and we need that social aspect in our lives to be happy. I hope that our world will be back to the old normal as soon as possible, because no matter how long things are like this, whether it be 2 years or 8, I will never view this as normal," end quote. Let that sink in. If there was ever any question that these COVID mitigation strategies and long-term masking have a negative impact on children, this should put that question to rest. We demand that moving forward, masking of children is only ever recommended with no conditions. Thank you.
Michael Lebedzinski, Limerick Township. Regardless of the official action you take tonight, the legacy of was supposed to be absent members of this board will be the long-lasting damage you've inflicted on our children. Whenever speech delay or depression or cognitive impairment or learning loss or divisiveness is uttered, the Springford community will draw an attention to the 5 of you. Despite the overwhelming and consistent facts and data from districts around us that students were not at risk of severe COVID outcomes, and Springford's own data showing quarantining healthy students was completely ineffective, you nonetheless on January 10th projected your fear, delusion, and mass psychosis on the students of this fine district. Instead of leading, you followed begrudgingly, clinging to any stitch of recommendation that would support your misguided mandates. Nelson Mandela once said, quote, "There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children." Take some time to reflect on this. Regarding the majority board absence tonight that apparently didn't happen, and the proposed suspension of policy 006, it is notable that the PA School Board Association and their guidance on this policy stated, quote, "This provision was intended and recommended as a safeguard to prevent the misuse and abuse."
Can we just interject for one moment? That policy or that
Time, please.
Yeah, we can hold the time. That's not going to be an agenda item this evening. We have, I presume, a majority in person.
That is correct.
So do we need to take action on that this evening?
No, we will not be taking action on that first item and action items.
All right, so there will not be an action item specific to that.
That's good. I'm glad people came to their senses. You all solemnly swore under oath that you would, quote, "support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and discharge the duties of your office with fidelity. All health and safety plans, not policies, plans, past and future, that mandate anything are an illegal overreach of your legislatively granted authority. Mr. Fitzgerald erred when advising you that you have the statutory authority to mandate masks. You do not. The Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court will soon affirm this once and for all under the doctrine of expressio unius exclusio alteris, which means expression of one is the exclusion of another. The Pennsylvania General Assembly expressly granted disease control and prevention, as well as other health measures, to the Department of Health, thereby excluding the Department of Education and public schools from governing it. Further, the Department of Health was vested with specific authority to control disease, which supersedes any perceived general power claimed by Mr. Fitzgerald under Section 510 of the PA School Code. Regarding the 2022-2023 Health and Safety Plan resolution on the agenda tonight, perhaps you're getting in front of this to ensure the taxpayer-funded ESSER grants continue, and if that is the case, that's great. Good planning ahead. But to be clear, no language in next year's plan can mandate anything. It may contain only recommendations. Perhaps this is why the current HSP mandates are enshrined in a plan, not a bona fide board policy. And lastly, I hope we get some clarity on the data. Hopefully there'll be a presentation by Mr. Rizzo tonight, because we're now dealing with 11 days stale data. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rachel Kirchner from Upper Providence, agenda item 2B. Without consent over the past year, you've psychologically conditioned my children for 30 hours a week, essentially rewiring their brain chemistry to not feel compliant or safe unless half their faces are covered by a useless piece of cloth at school. Your abuse of power and the implementation of an unsubstantiated mask mandate, which was never actually about safety, has literally made molecular changes at the synaptic level to the brains of my children. Their brains now unconsciously link wearing masks in school to a chemical response, which supersedes logical thinking. This is the same process by which habits are formed and the environmental conditioning process works. You have used the idea of the safety of my children as an impenetrable shield to protect your own self-interest, to shirk accountability, and to flex your positions of power. When the CDC finally came out saying that cloth masks were essentially ineffective, you did nothing. If it were really about safety, you would have done exactly what the Philadelphia School District did and updated the mask policy. If it were really about safety, when a student in the high school called into the school board meeting and told you point blank that the high school mask wearing is a joke and not enforced, you would have demanded that there be mask checks at the high school and demerits and detentions and suspensions, just like they did at PV. But you didn't. You did nothing. And then the selective mask enforcement last week between the school board meeting and the basketball game, even Evan Brandt couldn't ignore that. And now because of you, countless children will struggle to acclimate back to normal. And I know this because my anxious child, who over the past year has walked mask-free in every public situation unless it was mandated, is one of them. I saw his tears and watched as he silently grappled with the facts supporting why he was perfectly safe getting out of the car this morning without a mask, with his physical need to put on a mask in school because his brain is now wired to crave that neurological reward. He said, "Mom, I know I'm safe without wearing it, but I feel like I need it." You took it upon yourself, against my wishes and without my consent as his parent, to force my child to repeatedly do something unnecessarily. And because of you, he and many others must carry the burden you forced on them. And it was never about safety. It was about your own safety. My voice as a mother, which has been silenced by your vote, is still worthy of being heard. And it's time for you to put your own agendas aside and start to actually listen. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michael Diaz. I live at 1 Mountain View Lane, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and I've come to comment on agenda item 2B. I'm an 8th grade student here at Springford, and because of that, I feel I have a unique perspective that only a student can share. Today, I did not wear a mask, and today was probably one of the best days of school this year since Governor Tom's mask mandate. I feel this way because I got to create more connections with my classmates, and for the first time in months, I got to see them smile. I also had an easier time learning, and this was because some of my teachers chose to take off their face coverings. I could more easily communicate with them now, and they can more easily communicate with me. It is extremely difficult to hear anything that teachers are saying in the back of a classroom because their words are muffled and muted through a mask, and I would much rather be able to hear what they're saying than trying to decipher it. As a student here, I personally feel that the mask mandate should be removed, and that your right to wear a mask should be protected, but so should mine not to. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Susan Helm. I live at 53 Jessica Circle in Schwenksville. I'm here to talk about item 2B. Many in our country and our community have lost the ability to empathize with those with which they disagree. This is truly detrimental to our children. Schools should be a place that welcomes difference of opinion and open debate. That said, the parents who have been fighting, to make masks optional are just as concerned for their children's well-being as those who wish to continue mandating masks. I won't diminish or dismiss someone else's concerns, but I encourage those who wish to continue with this mandate to stop diminishing others and recognize the serious physical and emotional impact wearing masks in school has had on children. You cannot say that one child's struggle is any less important or less damaging than another's. For 2 years, one group of parents have had all of their demands met, and even with all of those measures in place, nothing has assuaged their fears. There are parents who will never feel it is safe enough to have their children on masks. However, that is their choice. We've asked that we have a choice. I'm not asking them to let go of their fears. I am, however, asking them to stop projecting their fears on my children. I also encourage the school board members to take a personal inventory of their actions in response to the pandemic and examine where and when some lost their empathy along the way. Maybe it's time to reevaluate whether you have the emotional tools necessary to be in your role. You work for all parents, not just the parents with which you agree. Excuse me. Bureaucrats have used this pandemic to rule over the public with a heavy hand, unwilling to change course even in the face of positive news. Changing course requires humility, maybe even admitting you were wrong or letting go of control, even when the guidance from the CDC has changed. Some of you hedge your position and purposely word the proposed change to the HSP as mask recommended, not mask optional. That wording is being used for no other reason than to give you an open door to reassert control over our children. One positive outcome from all of this is that many parents have woken up. Many who have never paid attention to local politics or attended school board meetings are now going to be watching you like hawks to ensure you never have the ability to exert this type of control over their children again. With that, there should be no declaration,
that the COVID-19 pandemic continues to be an emergency, as this would allow you to remask our children or shut down our schools on your whim. I demand you end the mask required policy immediately, changing it to mask optional with no conditions. Thank you.
How you doing? I'm Chris Richford. I live in Schwanksville. Both my children go to Brook. First off, thank you for 3 minutes of my time. It's upsetting as a parent thinking your child is getting abused by the people you trust them with based on a mandate by a select few. I'm here tonight to stand up for my kids and other children in the community. I'm asking you, please drop the mask mandate permanently. Give parents and their children the choice. During one of the previous meetings, you heard from members in the community who wanted a religious holiday acknowledged. One board member spoke up of how proud she was of all the people that gave speeches, even the young children. Another board member made reference to looking at other potential holidays. So the word that comes to mind is inclusive. And I find it hard to accept that you cannot be inclusive when it comes to mask choice. The reason I refer to the mask as abuse is I believe it has negative health impacts, both physical and psychological. My daughter, she comes home from school, it seems like now once a week, either with a bellyache, a headache, but mostly a headache. Now it seems as though my children continue to have issues with their lips and chin for the past 8 to 10 months. They're not meant to breathe their own carbon emissions for long periods of time. It's going to cause damage. I think you would want to maximize the amount of oxygen intake when trying to learn, not minimize. As for the psychological effects, virtual was hell for young children. And let's hope they're young enough that it doesn't tarnish their entire educational experience. For the 3 high school seniors who recently graduated and worked for me, they went through this ongoing charade, which I believe ruined one of the best times of their lives. They would come to work every day after school or virtual, complaining about the restrictions. These kids were involved in school. They were in drama, videotaping sport events, or other activities. Shortly after, one of their fathers passed away unexpectedly. And I can only imagine what the past 2.5-year roller coaster has been for him, my first employee. His dad was the one that answered the ad in the patch, brought him over to the shop, and asked if I hired his son for his first job. I became friends with his dad. He reffed my soccer games and said hi to my kids. We had a lot of things in common, one of which was having the choice. I can only fathom how difficult it's been for this kid and his family. I'm sure that's just one of hundreds of stories in our community. So when I say psychological abuse, that's exactly what I mean. I want the mask to stay off permanently. Now you're going to hear from my daughter and son. Stand up.
I'm tired of the mask. It gives me headaches and I have to come home from school a lot. I have belly aches every day because of the mask. I get bumps on my lips and chin, so I don't want to wear the mask anymore. I don't like to wear the mask because it is hard to breathe. I don't like to wear the mask.
I don't want to wear the mask anymore. When I tried to communicate with my teacher
It is hard because of the mask. When I come home, I complain to my mom and dad that I have headaches, and once in a while, I have been getting lip and chin infections. I get in trouble if I have my mask below my nose. I will get a tally. If I get a certain amount of tallies, I will miss recess and extra recess. Once I got in trouble for taking a sip of water. The mask sucks.
Hi, Tony Patrick from Oaks, Upper Providence or wherever. I have a speech here for you, so don't have to be worried. These are two books, the Bible and the United States Constitution. I'm writing about 2B, okay? The Bible was written by our God, and the Constitution, and this is a Hillsdale College one, is relied on the Bible, and that's how America was formulated. So here's a little science and history lesson. God gave us life and our forefathers the ability to create a constitution that gives all men and freedoms. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. I'm just giving you a little history, so just bear with me here. So among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These children are being held captive by you guys with the mask and breathing. They can't breathe free here in America. So that is to secure these rights. The governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed and the governed. So whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. And it is the institution of the government laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall most likely to be effective. That's safety and happiness. So what are you doing to the children in the high school or to the juniors in the elementary? You're containing their safety and their happiness. So I believe you took this oath to be the school board members, but that's not what I see you're doing. I see your voices say one thing and your actions say another. You all go out and we all got pictures of what you do when you're outside of the school. And then look at your family pictures that you post, no mask, when gathering inside or out. You're such hypocrites. You are not worthy to hold these positions and you're a disgrace to the school board. So with the Article 13 is the Constitution, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except a punishment of crime. What crime did these children do? Excuse me? Are you guys paying attention at all? Yeah, roll your eyes at me. That's pathetic yourself. So the party shall have been fully convicted. These children have not done any crimes. And within the extent of the United States, any place subject to their jurisdiction, you are creating little slaves through their little mask in these children. So today on Facebook, all the children that did come home saying that only like 50% of the children, they were somewhere afraid to even take the mask off. Like, when did you guys want to create something like that? I would love to take pictures of your children all masked up, all double or triple mask.
Okay.
And every time I see you every time I see you touching your mask, isn't that
Ma'am, 3
pathetic
minutes.
too? Yeah, okay, thank you. Again.
Evening. Teresa Westwood, 70 Plymouth Drive, Royersford, PA. First, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm not here to blame anyone or to talk down to anyone, so don't worry. I want to thank you overall, those of you that have kept our children and our staff safe these last 2 years. I don't think the last 2 years for anyone, any of our children or staff has been easy, and I appreciate the amount of time, effort, and sacrifice that all of you have put into trying to keep our students and staff safe. So I'll start with some gratitude maybe. I also appreciate that you followed science and recommendations from the CDC, the Montgomery County of Health, and other agencies that are reputable to align our health and safety plans to appropriate guidelines. So we could keep schools open, which I really think was the main goal. And we did that. We had a really effective year so far, and we've kept schools open. And I've been personally, as a parent in this district, really happy about that. The other thing I'd like to say is that I'm in support of the amendment of the health and safety plan. I do believe it is time. I'm encouraged to see that numbers are coming down, that maybe we can get back to some sense of normalcy. So not everyone that wears a mask is hiding, and not everyone that wears a mask wants to wear one forever. I do believe, and I'm excited that we're getting to a point that hopefully things will get better and that we can amend the health and safety plan to reflect that. I also hope that as you consider changes to the plan, that in case things get worse again, I really hope they don't, but given the roller coaster we've seen with this virus, if they do, that we have very clear metrics that are aligned to when we need to revisit the plan and potentially re-examine that. Maybe there'll be no reason to do that. Let's keep our fingers crossed, but just in case, we should have that clear alignment of metrics. That's really all I had to say. Thank you for the time.
How you doing, folks? Ryan Nice. I live in Schwengsville. We talk a lot at work about giving people the benefit of the doubt. I think the polarization in our community largely revolves around not being able to give each other the benefit of the doubt that someone who has historically been over the past 2 years extremely pro-mask or pro-vaccine or pro-cyber schooling in order to protect the kids, that they're not doing it out of love for the kids, or that someone who is very anti-mask, anti-cyber schooling also is not acting out of extreme love for their children. It is the denial of the benefit of the doubt for each other that is going to be doing the most damage from this point forward. The fact is, the decisions that have been made up until this date cannot be undone. We, as a community of adults and parents who all love Springford children, we now have to pivot to healing the damage that has been done. The facts are in. K through 12, especially when we look at kindergartners, first graders, the facts are in. These kids are behind. They're behind on reading, they're behind on social development, they're behind on emotional development, which means that we have to come together. We have to come together and do what's right for these kids and help them catch up. My kids reported that half of all children today did not feel comfortable not wearing a mask. And that's not kids. If there's any kids watching this video, don't feel ashamed about wearing a mask if you're not ready to take it off. Do what you're going to do. No one here in the community blames you or shames you. Do what you're going to do. But if there are kids who emotionally don't feel comfortable walking around school without covering their face, guys, we've done something really damaging if that's the case with even a small percentage of those kids. And we as the adults, we have to do it. Listen, I'm rooting for you. Even, if you made decisions I didn't agree with you, I'm behind you 100% now. I'm rooting for you now because together we are going to heal these Springford kids. I want to say one last thing. These kids have almost gone through the whole adolescence without a freaking school dance. Most of them haven't had a chance to fall in love and have their first kiss. Guys, we've got to double down, suck it up, stop blaming each other, and create an incredibly positive environment, an incredibly happy environment for these kids from this point forward and make up for lost ground. You are our leaders. That is your charge. Come on and do it. We're behind you. Let's stop blaming each other. Let's focus on the kids again.
Thank you very much. Brian, do we have anyone on Zoom?
We do. Day, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself, then state your first and last name, as well as your full address.
Hi, this is Lauren Day, 57 Greenbrier Drive in Phoenixville. I also want to thank you for your time and your commitment. I am so glad that the CDC feels it's safe enough for us to be mask optional. I just want to request that we have a plan in place in case we do go to high again, that Springford has a plan in case we have to mask the students again. I just think it would be a good idea to have that plan in place so we don't have to go through these meetings each time something happens. Fingers crossed, nothing happens, but we've seen what has happened with the virus. Thank you.
Julie, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself, then state your first and last name, as well as your full address.
Julie Ty, 35 Longacre Drive, Collegeville. I'm commenting on agenda item 2B. This weekend, the administration and school board decided to immediately implement the CDC changes in anticipation of today's board meeting's official approval. Going forward, can we expect the same will be done if the CDC goes in the other direction with the recommendation? If at some point, and I hope it does not come back to this, but we fall back into level high, or the CDC comes out and recommends mandatory masking in school, can we expect that the administration and the board will act in the same manner and send out an email to immediately implement that change? You have now let us know that this can be done prior to a board meeting. Whatever your position, I ask that the districts strive to be consistent. Either we are implementing CDC guidance immediately or we are not. Lack of consistency makes your decision look biased. Thank you.
Tony, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself, then state your first and last name, as well as your full address.
Good evening. My name is Tony Folino. I live in Upper Providence Township in the village of Montclair. I'm speaking on agenda item 2B. I've expressed my opinion on the masking of children over the last 2 years to some of you. To others, I have not wasted my time because you chose to not look at the facts and data, but rather made decisions based on emotion, like the current board president, Maggie Wright, who in the August 16, 2021 board meeting said, "I'm not so concerned about whether masks are effective or not. What I'm concerned about is how my students and families feel about that." Her comment and her vote that followed was based on emotion, how my students and families feel about that, not about facts and data, but about feelings. Now let me quote Benjamin Franklin, who said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Without any authority to do so, you took away from the Springford School District families, the liberty away from the Springford School District families. You stripped them of their freedom to choose what is in their best interest for the health and safety of their children. What were you looking for? Temporary safety? There are hundreds of cold, flu, and other viruses. Why didn't you try to stop them in the past? In 2020, my daughter contracted the highly transmissible monovirus. She was hospitalized for several days. Did I expect you to protect her? Absolutely not. It's not your job to stop my children from getting a virus. It's your job to educate them. You're not a doctor, so stop practicing medicine without a license. If you determine there's an outbreak of a virus in a school, the right thing to do is to inform the families so they are aware, similar to how you would inform a family if there was an outbreak of lice in the classroom. That's where your responsibility ends. There are many physicians and pediatricians and healthcare professionals who call the masking of our children child abuse, and I agree with them. You would never think to put your hand over a child's mouth, but that's exactly what you're doing when you force them to wear the mask. You're restricting the flow of fresh air into their lungs. You're causing them to breathe harmful carbon dioxide. You're increasing their levels of stress and anxiety. You don't do this to children. Not today, not ever. You were successful at one thing. You successfully eliminated the transmission of smiles. Way to go. Tonight, board members, be less like Maggie and more like Ben, and return to the Springford School District families what is rightfully theirs, the freedom to choose what is in their best interest for the physical and mental health and well-being of their children. Thank you.
Allison O'Brien, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself, then state your first and last name, as well as your full address.
Allison O'Brien, Upper Providence Township. I just wanted to say to the board that I hope that there is some metrics set in place that if we do see cases going up again, we have a plan. Hope a lot of the parents that are speaking are doing blanket statements of children not being able to learn, children having trouble. I don't think that that's necessary for everyone. My 4-year-old and my 7-year-old wear masks to school every day and they're thriving. So let's not make blanket statements. And I also want to say her name is Dr. Wright. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Carolyn, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself, then state your first and last name, as well as your full address.
My name is Carolyn Olivares, and I'm from Limerick. Speaking on item 2B. So, as a result of the CDC update, Springford will loosen the enforcement of current mask mandate. With all due respect, you do not have the authority to loosen anything because you're not allowed to mandate anything. So, no emergency justifies the violation of any of the provisions of the United States Constitution. And I encourage any parent to file a claim against this board for the things that they've done to our children and the civil rights that they've breached. Thank you.
Danielle, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself, then state your first and last name, as well as your full address.
Hi, my name is Danielle Felino. I live in Montclair, and I would like to speak on agenda action item 2B. We've been at this for almost 2 years now. We are all tired and frustrated, but at the end of the day, we all want the best education for our children. Your jobs are to educate our children while keeping them safe in your care. And I think it's about time we get back to focusing on that, not just pointing fingers at one another. We can all agree the goal has been to do what's best for the students. However, we've made some mistakes along the way while following the moving target of science. Because of those mistakes, we are looking at learning loss at all levels, not to mention the mental and emotional toll not being with their peers or being masked in school has caused the entire school population. We have all heard of the increase in unacceptable behavior, especially at the middle school level in this district. Could these policies you're forcing on our community be attributed to these outbursts? We need to work as a community to start working towards solutions to these issues. Let's get back to the school teaching our kids and us doing the parenting. Everyone on the board has previously said in one way or another, they will follow the CDC, Montgomery County Department of Health, PA Department of Education, our own nursing staff, etc. These professionals all seem to be in agreement to give people the choice. So are you going to ignore those same experts now and hold our kids hostage because their opinions no longer fit your personal narrative? In closing, keep in mind, most students weren't even wearing masks properly in school anyway. I have personally spoken about this at previous meetings, and my husband and I have repeatedly pointed out the selective enforcement of this policy for over a year now to the administration and the board. Anyone can easily see evidence of this by perusing the Ram Country YouTube channel, any of the Springford social media pages, including the sports, clubs, and booster pages, or any of the students' personal social media accounts. This is a virus. It isn't going anywhere. If you really want to help the students stay healthy and not spread viruses and germs, seriously monitor their hand washing. Every health professional will tell you hand washing, not slapping a mask on your face, is the most important step to prevent the spread of any illness. Thank you.
Gary Wheaton, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself, then state your first and last name, as well as your full address.
Gary Wheaton, 31 Beach Court, Collegeville, PA. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. My daughter's basketball game ran a little bit late. But I've been advocating now for quite some time about the effectiveness of masks, and I'm talking about 2B if that's not obvious. And finally, glad to see that our friends at the CDC, who, by the way, have done probably a very subpar job managing this pandemic, they finally came out and said that cloth masks don't work. I said that in a meeting in August. I said it last November when I stood there and the vapor came up into my glasses and you could see the vapor clearly. I'm not going to get into all the details of what other parents spoke about. Try not to politicize this. There's a really, really simple solution. And here it is. From this point forward, make masks optional. If parents choose to have their kids wear masks, the school then provides KN95s or N95s, which provide 95% effectiveness in a two-way manner. That is the only compromise that is reasonable. And if the board cannot agree upon that, then I'm not sure what other type of basic compromise that you can agree upon. That will satisfy both sides of the argument. It'll protect the kids that want to go into school and have that two-way protection, and it will allow people to have choice. It's as simple as that. And I have a feeling that we're probably going to talk about KN95s later in this meeting, and there's funding available. So that's it. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Krista, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself and state your first and last name, as well as your full address. Krista, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself and state your first and last name, as well as your full address. Krista is not making a comment. We will move on to the next person. LNW, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself and state your first and last name, as well as your full address. LNW, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself, then state your first and last name.
Sorry. Ellen Townsend, agenda item 2B. You're using your power to control a demographic you can control. I drop off my kids and I trust that they're being taken care of the way that I would at home. So here they're being controlled because they can be controlled because they do what they're told. They're just kids, and kids whose death rate from COVID is 0.0007% for school age. I don't want you to control my kid's ability to breathe, her ability to share a smile, to express herself nonverbally, her ability to learn. She's learning how to read and spell. Yes, this is causing learning loss in this regard. Please make sense of why this has lasted 2 years. They're each suffering in their own way. Speech therapy, learning loss, kids' anxiety and depression, child suicide, all at an all-time high. Why are we doing this to our poor innocent children who are just doing what they're told in fear of getting in trouble? That's right, they're in fear of taking that useless piece of cloth off their face because their teachers, nurses, and principals are telling them they have to wear a mask, and they don't even give a reason. And if they do give a reason, the reason's doing that much more damage, creating a deep fear within them during a sensitive childhood year. This fear will imprint on who they are and be with them for life. You're creating a trauma for this young generation, for your own kids. Do the research of how much damage this is causing. One day, our kids are going to be grown adults and look back on this as being completely messed up what has been done to them. I can at least have pride in knowing that I knew I fought for them, that I am trying to avoid damaging them for life. If you care about our kids, you will amend this health and safety plan to protect our children's emotional health And if you fear getting sick from your kids, then maybe you need to take a hard look at yourself as a parent. Why are we harming our children for our own selfish reasons? Especially when the rest of the world around them are walking around maskless every day. They see it and they think logically. They're smart kids. If you're so worried about wearing a mask, wear it in your house. Wear it N95 all the time. Well, is that too much to ask? Well, consider what you've told, not asked, our vulnerable children to do the last 2 years. These children have been taught they must comply. When our kids are adults, they're going to go back and they're going to look at this and they're going to feel abused. I won't let my kids think that for a second. Please amend the health and safety plan to be mask optional forever. Thank you.
At this time, there are no further public comments to be heard on Zoom.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to action items. We are disregarding action item A as it is irrelevant to our meeting this evening. And moving on to action item B. The Board of School Directors hereby authorizes an amendment to the district's 2021-2022 Health and Safety Plan effective immediately upon board approval, and recommends that students and staff, kindergarten through 12th grade, and visitors wear appropriate face coverings while indoors during school activities. Further, nothing herein shall limit the administration's requirement to adhere to mandatory mitigation strategies that may be required in the future by the Montgomery County Department of Health or other applicable agencies with oversight over the district. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any board discussion?
I would like to raise a couple questions. And Mr. Fitzgerald, this is directed more towards you. So I know that there's been some commentary around the federal transportation mandate versus the CDC guidance on transportation, not having to wear masks on school buses. So just for clarity, what supersedes the other, or do you have an opinion on that?
If we're speaking about masks on buses.
Correct.
The CDC came out on Friday with all of its updated guidance to essentially reinforce that it's their policy that masks should be on transportation modes, buses and the like. However, they're not going to enforce it as we understand it. Therefore, and candidly, there was some discussion when that order initially came out. This was again about a year ago or so, a little over a year ago, in terms of its enforceability in the first place. But with that said, they are not enforcing it. And we understand now that to the extent that it was required, we see it as a recommended only at this point.
And what's your opinion on the federal transportation mandate? Because there's been some conversation on it still being in effect, right, on planes and on public transportation systems. And do you see any applicability or any type of connection?
No, I mean, that was part of the debate as to how it, and it was never addressed in court per se, how it dealt with school buses and school districts. They clarified, at least during the time that it was applicable. Now they're saying, well, we're not going to enforce it. So to the extent that there's a federal component to it, that's really outside of our jurisdiction.
Do we need any language on here to clarify this, that it's no longer required on the busing?
I don't think so. I think we can take it for what we got on Friday, and it's not mandatory now for our buses. So I'm comfortable with how it is written right now.
Any other board discussion?
So I do want to bring up another point. There were some community members that had wrote in today that were questioning the way that the motion was worded. So, specifically, I think the comment was around why we are using the term, and if I read the motion here,
effective immediately upon board approval, recommends that the students and staff wear appropriate face coverings while indoors during school activities versus coming out and saying mask optional. Now, for me, this is not about one stand or the other, or whether you are pro mask or pro mask optional. This is something that, even before taking office, was something that I had commented on. If we go back even to like August of last year, when the CDC was saying that regardless of vaccination status, we recommend masking indoors, right? And I think there was some confusion on the way that the agenda was worded, in that I think some were taking it that we're making a recommendation, that we're following the recommendation, and therefore we're being mask optional, versus the other way. I just want to be really clear. This has nothing to do with my stance on masking or not, but I feel like if we are going to come out and say that, really, I would love to see this just be like, the school district requires masks or the school district does not require masks. And by not requiring masks, the choice in those instances where we say that it's not required, the choice is up to the parents. I just think we need to be really clear when it comes to these pivotal moments where parents need information. I don't want them to have to read between the lines. And frankly, I think an unenforced recommendation, because that's essentially what this is going to become, which is we're saying that the school district, we recommend masks, but we're not going to enforce it. I think an unenforced recommendation is generally worthless. And again, speaking only for myself.
I have to jump in here because I want to own this, right? This recommending the recommendation at this table was me with support. And the reason that I went with that is because the entities that were weighing in on what we needed to do made a recommendation. And Mr. Fitzgerald will tell you, I said to him, Mr. Rizzo will say, well, then we'll recommend what they're recommending, because they never required, they never mandated. So in turn, that's where that came from. I will further say that I never, ever, ever wanted to use the words mandated or optional. Never. And I've said it repeatedly at this table. Frankly, I think that they carry very negative connotations for whatever side of the masking policy you're on. And I very much felt that if we went with a required or a recommended piece, we were just being a little bit softer. And then to Ryan, is it nice or nice? Nice. Nice. To Mr. Nice's statement earlier, it was never, nothing we did here was ever to ignite the crowd or to blow people up or to get people so fired up they were so angry. We wanted to try to figure out the mess we were in the best we could and deliver the message as best we could. Did we change on a dime multiple times? Did we flip-flop over and over? For that part of it that I had in it, I'm very sorry to the whole community. But that's where that language of recommended versus required came from, not to be ambivalent, but to be a little bit gentler.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And please, Colleen, know that my comments were not.
No, I'm not saying that, but I really did want to clarify for everybody else out there too. You'll never hear me say mandated or optional. For the rest of my time on this board, I will never use those words. And I've stood by that. I think you all know that, so.
And so going back to, really the crux of my message being that I just think we need to have a little bit more clarity, because if we are getting questions from the community about what does this motion mean, then I think we need to revisit how we write that, whether it's stated, however we state that in the HSP or on agendas moving forward.
I think we're starting understanding what the difference between recommended and optional is, because what you're recommending, you're not requiring, you're not mandating, you're saying, here's what we think is a good idea for you to do, and we're not going to make you do it, which is the same thing as saying it's optional. I don't know why we want to get into nitpicking about it. I don't see what the big deal is.
I think we're starting to wordsmith this to death. And there's a motion
that's on the table. We have Mr. Fitzgerald here as our legal advisor. He's gone through this. I'm going to assume his office has gone through this. I would like to move forward with the motion.
Is there any other board comment at this time? If not, we'll move forward with a vote. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that vote would be 9-0. So moving onward, we have our board and committee reports. Extracurricular report, Mr. Schaefer, do you have a report for us this evening?
I do. Thank you very much. So the extracurricular committee met on Tuesday, February the 1st, and I'm happy to say that there were 11 people in attendance. That's a record since I've chaired this committee. It's good to see. We had some presentations, administration presented on activities at the high school level, highlights of that. There were 3 new clubs since the last time we met. Are you laughing at me, Miko? You're just happy now. Okay. By the way, you're welcome to laugh at me. It's okay. National Organization for Women, Junior Statesmen of America, and the Social Justice Club were 3 new clubs that had been established since the last time we met. No more we had a presentation on the upcoming high school musical, which is Mamma Mia this weekend. It'll be exciting to see the students on stage without masks, having a great time. Alex Cifelli came to the meeting and presented on this. This is his 9th production. He's a 7th grade music teacher. If you don't know Alex, he's fantastic. Very passionate about this. They're just to highlight, because this was news to me. There are 150 students that are participating in this weekend's event. No cuts, so all inclusive. He called it a melting pot of students. They've worked for 3 months on this upcoming production. And he mentioned at the end that he would like to see more of a curricular arm for the fine arts. Mr. Swire, who teaches personal finance, presented on DECA, which he called the club that prepares students for the real world, which I felt was a very good summary. So we started here with about 40 kids. It's grown to 100 kids. And in February, we took about 40 kids to Hershey to compete. And that was exciting. So the last highlight, Dr. Moyer and Zach Laurie from Brook Elementary came. And for those who are on the board or paying attention, last year we supported a pilot program for 4th graders to participate in a robotics program after school. There were 56 kids that have signed up for this. The attention and participation was so large that they had to split them into 2 groups. And Mrs. Crew, I don't know, do we have that video? Because we discussed, but I never checked back with you. He prepared a fantastic video that he played, which I thought we would have here, but it's my fault if it's not. I would expect that this program will be brought to the board to expand for all other elementary schools to participate in it. It's really neat to see the problem solving that these kids are doing together and working with these robots. Those are the highlights. We adjourned at 8:38. Next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, April the 5th.
Yes, I have a question. So.
All questions must be submitted in writing in advance.
Okay,
Sorry.
no. My question is this, with the musical, Mr. Rizzo, don't we usually have just a small number of people or they come in, they do a little something? It's Mamma Mia. Could we have that?
Shows this weekend. You want me to call them over now or?
Well, that would be fine, or we could have it maybe like next month. They want to recap. They just want to do a little
How
something.
about, I'll talk to Mrs. Fellow, we'll see what we can do.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just like to say, Mr. Schaefer, it was really a great meeting to attend, and the emphasis that we have on the building the clubs, I think it was really, there was a lot going on. I was really happy about it.
To follow back up about the video that Dr. Moyer and Mr. Lurie had, they were, Mr. Rizzo, they were going to present at this meeting. So is that accurate?
So given the nature, given the nature of the meeting and the potential length, we really trimmed down the agenda this month or this week because we figured we were going to be here for quite some time. So we held off on presentations until next month.
Policy, Mrs. Earl, do you have a presentation for this evening?
Yes, the policy committee met on Monday, February 4th, and we spent a great deal of the meeting on the policy 128 on EDI. We didn't really settle anything. There was so much comment on it that we decided to send it back to the, I guess we could call it the internal subcommittee, because we had so many comments, and they're going to try hopefully pull all those comments together and bring it back to the policy committee in March. We had the following policies sent on to our solicitor for approval, and then on to the board was 320, freedom of speech in non-school settings, 321, political activities, and 322, gifts, and 325, dress and grooming. Apparently only the freedom of speech in non-school settings made it through the legal approval, and I believe that's on tonight's agenda for a first read. The other three, I guess Mr. Rizzo, they had some issues that we'll address again in March. And then 323, tobacco and vaping products, 324, personnel files, 326, complaint process, 328, compensation plans and salary schedules, and 330, overtime. We did not get to, and we will discuss them in the March meeting. That's all I have. Mr. Rizzo, you had to add anything?
You did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for the curriculum and technology meeting, or as Mr. Catalano would like to say, the technology and the curriculum meeting, we met on Monday, February 14th. Technology went first. Mr. Catalano spoke extensively about the security, technology security updates for that and what we have in place to keep our district secure. We also talked about the summer refresh device evaluation, so updating the process for device refreshment with that. And then with regards to curriculum, with this summer, we're starting to plan for the summer programs. Mrs. Garvey provided information about the summer pre-K program. Incoming kindergarten students will be invited to be screened to determine if they are eligible to participate in the summer program, and the pre-K program will be held at Brook Elementary at the end of June through July. Mrs. Garvey also provided an update for the Summer Rams program, which will be held at Upper Providence Elementary School and the 5-6 intermediate building. And that is June 27th through August 4th. And there will be additional information coming on that. We're also pretty excited. Mrs. Angelucci talked about our micro credentialing program that we have going. It's basically using our staff to provide professional development, which would be highly relevant to our teachers. So we're working on that using Canvas. Spring Forward Cyber Learning. Currently, we have 311 students K to 12. 191 students are in grades 9 to 12, and students that take advantage of some of them of a hybrid option. So they're in school for some of the classes, and they are virtual for some of the other ones. Teachers are also were able to take advantage of 2 different training opportunities for Canvas, and we have 55 classes that are being built on Canvas. So I want to just kind of bring, and we have 45 to 50 more next year. So just to let's point out that the teachers are taking advantage of using this platform to continue to grow our programs. And our Title I parent family engagement, we have materials that I think some of that is on the agenda too, to be able to reach out to our families there. curriculum programming and resources update. So this would, that summer we will have a Spanish teacher attending the advanced placement AP for training for Spanish. So that's pretty exciting. We will be partnering also with the University of Pittsburgh to offer a child development course at the high school, which is also something we've really worked hard. The administration's worked hard to bring to our school. We will see on the agenda about voting for on the proximity learning, which it was discussed at the meeting, and that is, for those of you on the board that are unfamiliar with it, that is as a backup in case we are not able to get the long-term subs that we need for those classes, then we would need to rely on the proximity learning to cover those classes. So we could discuss that when it comes up at vote if someone has any questions about that. Okay. And so that moves us on to finance with Mr. Clinton. Jackson.
We have questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Of course, absolutely.
I am going to assume that there's going to be further discussion, or is the 700 Chromebooks on the agenda tonight for approval, the $366,000. Okay, and the French class, we're currently short French teachers, correct?
Yes, it's a French teacher, I think actually. Dr. Murray could answer that.
We're proposing this as a backup plan so that we have a plan in case we cannot secure somebody with the proper certification. So it's not necessarily a shortage of subs, it's a shortage of a person with the right certification for this class. So this is a backup plan that we're hoping we don't have to use, but we want to have it in place just in case we do.
All right, we can discuss it further when we get into it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I had a question about technology. How much at this point do we know, or maybe this is finance, how much is owed back to the capital reserve for what we've done with technology? Because I know they're paying it back, but where are we at on those, on that?
That's going to be part of my discussion later on, but it's a valid point, and we'll get Mr. Fink to present something on that,
All
which goes back to my question regarding the new 700 Chromebooks.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, going to the best committee. Finance meeting was held on February 8th. Executive reports for the 2021-22 reports through January 31st, 2022. Liquidity, our balance is $107.5 million on pace as projected. Our revenues are ahead about 1.7 mil due to the EIT and the transfer tax as previously discussed in some of our earlier meetings. Expenditures, property services, $345,000 on the budget, primarily due to the outsourcing of the outsourced cleaning labor shortage that we're experiencing. We also discussed real estate, transfer tax revenue, $567,000 in excess of the budget year to date. We're on pace for between $3 and $3.2 million. The 5-year average trend is around 2.2 to 2.3 mil a year, and possible consideration for the adjusted budget for 2023. We also discussed our income taxes. We're still ahead by about $300,000 for year to date. On pace for about 12.4 million for the year. Current year budget is $11 million. Food service. Overall, we served about 420,000 meals versus the 281 from last year, which was due to the buildings being open and all year and fully reimbursed meals through the federal funding. In the black for approximately $685,000 so far this year. These funds will be needed to reinvest in our food service equipment. Currently evaluating food service equipment needs. Shout out to all the great food service managers that we have. We're doing a complete review of the equipment and building this into our 5 to 10-year plan for maintenance and replacements. We also discussed the 2022-23 budget update. Budget books are out in the departments and buildings, and they're back now. It's 218. What's up next? We have to update the budget books, some teacher tours for labor needs with Mr. Reese, Mr. Rizzo, and Ms. Lees. evaluating new initiatives, and review the governor's proposed budget. There will be a lot to talk about in March. And that completes my report for finance for now.
Mr. Jackson, can you review for the community the dates for the budget approval process? Or Mr. Fink?
March, April, May, and June. Mr. Fink, can you give some more specificity to those dates? Jim?
Yeah, I'm just looking up the files. So I can, if you want the exact dates, what
we just looking
what we
for the
were
step?
doing is we would be reviewing the budget in great detail in committee come March and April. At the April work session meeting, likely I would do a presentation to the board, to the community on what the proposed final budget would be. That would be proposed final for a final vote, likely at the May meeting. Of course, between the proposed final and the final adjustments can be made as we see fit. For the past number of years, we targeted the end of May to have the official board adoption of the budget so that my office and the tax collectors and the county have enough time to get all the paperwork ready to get the bills out, which is required by July 1st. Any questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome. March, April, May, June.
Since we're under finance there, and Mrs. Giambattista, or I'll just call you Tina, did you, on here, there were, and I know there was in the board memo reference to this too, but a number of additional evaluations to be completed. How are we doing with catching up to speed with some of those? Because I know we had lagged behind with the pandemic. Are we getting somewhere?
Yes, so we are still currently down one school psychologist, and that's why we had referred out to the intermediate unit. We currently are using the CCIU, and we just contracted with the Montgomery County IU because we were having trouble securing additional staff from the CCIU. We are, with this new person that's available, that's coming from the Montgomery County IU, we should be able to help fill the gap at the fifth, sixth grade level where we have an inordinate amount of reevaluations that are due. It's time sensitive because of the triennial date. And it happens to fall, most of the fifth graders are coming up for reevaluation based on their entrance into the school district. So with this addition, we should be able to help close that gap and provide some relief to the school psychologists who are working very hard.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. On to the second best committee.
Thank you. Property Committee was held February 8th, 2022 at 7:30. Meeting was called to order. Some ongoing business was water testing in the schools. There was discussion regarding Act 39 of 2018, which requires public discussion. If school districts are not water testing for the year, the district has adopted a 3-year testing cycle, which was scheduled for 2022, but will be deferred to 2023 because the drinking outlets are currently out of use due to COVID-19 protocols. There was new business, and these next 3 items will be on the agenda for approval. Brook Elementary, chiller replacement. There was discussion for the replacement of the chiller at a cost of $134,537 through CoStar. CoStar is a pre-qualification selection by the state. It also, it's bid protected. We looked at 3 different companies. This item is part of the 22-23 capital plan is on the agenda for approval. Second item is Oaks Elementary mason repair. There was discussion regarding the non-structural repairs on the exterior skin of the building. There was a contract that was awarded to Weatherproof Technologies for $308,000 through Keystone Purchasing Network. This item is a part of the 22-23 capital plan, is on the agenda for approval. Upper Providence Elementary Inclusive Playground. I hope that was correct, Dr. G. Okay. We discussed the purpose of the playground equipment and the proposal provided by the recreational sources for $122,262 through CoStar Purchasing Plan. This item is also on the agenda for approval. And a big shout out to Evans Elementary Home and School Association for donating $28,767 for new playground equipment. This item is on the agenda strictly for informational purposes only. School police and emergency mandates, management. Good boy, I'm never going to live that down. Projects and initiatives. There's daily traffic control at the high school, 567 UPE, EES, and extreme cold temperatures. There were 64 S2SS tips for the school year. There's been 6 since January 21st, 22. There was discussion regarding fire drills, evacuation drills, ALICE drills occurred and was documented per safe school requirements. And that completes the property report.
Any questions for Mr. Jackson? Can we move?
Sorry, I do have one question about property. The carpet in the auditorium, that's coming out of capital reserve too? Is that going to be replenished?
The carpet or the reserve?
The money.
Yes,
It doesn't say that on here.
we will correct that.
Okay, thanks.
And just for the record, that carpet is 21 years, 3 months, and 5 days old, just for the record.
I'm good with it. I just wondered where it was coming from.
Any other questions? Then we move on to personnel. Did you have anything tonight, Mrs. Osowski?
Yes, so the Personnel Committee, we met on February 9th, and we met to have some benefit summaries meetings with the groups. There are 4 groups that we met with this year. We were able to listen to them. We heard their frustrations. We acknowledged those frustrations. We talked with them about some of their requests and some of their needs. I know that Mr. Jackson, along with Dr. Wright and myself, are on that committee. Mr. Jackson has followed up with Mr. Hunter specifically regarding a few questions and issues that need to be addressed. So that's ongoing. And then we did have an executive session tonight, as Dr. Wright pointed out before this meeting, to review with the rest of the board what the requests are of these 4 groups. We will now go back, the process is we will now go back to these 4 groups and we will talk with them with where the board landed on a number of the requests. They are always really positive meetings. This year we did hear some frustrations, obviously because of COVID, and we wanted them to know that they were heard, and we are working through the requests with the rest of the board. That's about it for personnel. Does anybody have any questions related to that?
Thank you. We are on to the WMCTC. Was Mrs. Earl or Mrs. Weingarten or Mrs. Southby?
Yeah, that's me too. So we did have a meeting on February 7th, and we have a new director over at the Western Center. We have Dave Living Good over there. And then we also have Mark Holtzman, who is the new principal. And these meetings have gone from short to lengthy. So, well, no, it's not. But, we do get very good reports from them about what's happening in the building. They are making some. They want to propose some building renovations, and there is some grant money that could potentially cover some of that. So that's one piece that's out there. We talked about some of the new hires that are there and went through the rest of the agenda. There was some new business that we discussed. There is a negotiation subcommittee. I'm on that. Mr. McCarrick and Mr. Strunk from the other two districts as well are on that committee. And we'll be working with Mr. Fitzgerald through the teacher negotiations over there. Our own Mrs. Earl is going to head up a policy subcommittee over there, which does currently not exist at the Western Center, but we are trying to have it become a little bit more in line with the sending or the partner school districts. And then finally, as a final note that night, Ms. Graham, who is our chair over there, brought to the board some first conversations regarding the Limerick Fire Department's project under Chief Schuler. There will be a presentation at the March JOC meeting, and I will bring you back some more information about that as well and what that presentation will include. We discussed also doing a retreat, trying to do an orientation, things of that sort. When board members come on the JOC, you don't always know what is expected of you, and rather than learning on the fly, we're going to try to bring in some of that into the JOC. So to build those relationships with our partner districts, any of you that do have children or you have affiliations with the Western Center will know that when two of the districts went to mask recommended, the Western Center followed suit, and actually followed suit because all three have. So we will meet next month, and then I will bring back a report about that presentation. Mr. Rizzo is going to join us next month also, so I'm excited to see that he will be there. And yeah, any questions on Western?
Just a couple. I think you answered one. So our item B is also associated with the Western Montgomery Center, correct?
In a sense, because the rule with the Western Center, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Fitzgerald, the rule is when two of the partner districts, or that's what we're trying to move towards from sending districts to partner districts, when two of those districts make a decision, such as, for example, about masking, then Western Center follows suit. So as it turned out, all three did, and the email went out over the weekend that they would be going to mask recommended as of today. So that's what happened. Yes.
And yeah, we did get a lot of emails this weekend. Grant money for what?
So they, this Mr. Living Good is from Pottstown area and has a lot of familiarity with doing a lot of grants and things of that sort. He's done fairly well, very well out there at Western. I mean, at Pottstown. So he's bringing some of that experience with him to the Western Center. And he discussed when he did an assessment of what's going on there with his staff there, he identified some areas. I asked him, it is ESSER grant money, and I think it's about 300, I want to say 362,000. They're looking at replacement or maintenance of water appliances in the boiler room, the water conditioner and water heater, updating surveillance and installing more cameras, adding security to the garage doors and the auto tech gate, and also installing a bell and PA system. Not sure if all of those areas would be covered by that money. So we'll see how that shakes out, but I'll stay on top of that.
So that scope, whatever that may eventually become, would not require money from Springford.
That's correct. But I will remind you that we are in the start of teacher negotiations.
Thank you.
Any questions, board questions? Then we move on to the Legislative Committee. Mrs. Deardorff, do you have a report?
I do. On February 16th, the Montgomery County School District Legislative Committee met. I was late to that meeting because we had our meeting with the townships and the boroughs, so I hopped in afterwards, where, as usual, much of the conversation was about charter reform, fair funding. We did receive a February report regarding government relations from the MCIU, which I forwarded to the board members tonight. And of course, if anybody from the communities would like that information, I'm happy to provide it, but I won't read through all the details. But on the federal level, in February 17th, the Congress did pass the third continuing resolution for the fiscal year 2020 to avert the federal shutdown. And then they're also on February 7th, finalized proposed rules regarding school meal standards. Locally in Pennsylvania, both the House and Senate are in recess right now to facilitate respective appropriations committee hearings on the governor's proposed budget. The House will return to session on March 21st and the Senate will return on March 28th. They are still having their committee meetings. So there's a lot about PA revenue, about the 22-23 PA budget. On February 8th, Governor Wolf presented his proposed budget. Specifically for education, there is over a 1.5 billion increase for the fair funding formula, a $200 million increase for special education, $600 million increase for pre-K, 10 million for Head Start supplemental, 6 million for career and technical education, and a $16 million increase for student transportation, as well as allowing some actions for school districts to change their names. Purple school funding, school funding lawsuit continues to go on. So I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question or if I should wait till Mr. Schaefer's PSBA report. But a lot of time at these meetings is spent talking about the resolution calling for charter school funding reform. And there's a lot of schools in our area throughout the whole state that have adopted this resolution. I know that I remember Mrs. Melton talking about it in previous sessions. I did ask the NCIU and other members of the committee if they really had a historical remembrance of what Springford traditional, if we've ever discussed it. I just don't know. Has it come up? What have we?
Yeah, we did. And I have a unwritten policy that if it was 6 months ago, I'm going to need to review notes. I am actually going to ask to push my report on the PSBA until the work session in March. So we can talk about that and I can make sure that wherever we stood on it and, we can, well, at least I can inform you and the public.
Cool, thank you.
Abby, just to your question, over the last several years, various iterations of charter school resolutions have come to the board. I know that one in particular was modified and then approved by the board. Other times a recommended resolution that came from either PSBA or the IU, I think was tabled at one point. So there have been back and forth where some have been approved, others have not. I think one of the issues the board had felt at the time was what good was it doing ultimately? I think there was some frustration in some earlier iterations of it. But certainly if a resolution is desired by the board, it should come before them as an action item at a subsequent meeting.
And thank you for that. There are representatives from the IU or partners that they work with that are very willing to speak with us about why they encourage that resolution being passed. So if the board is interested, just let me know and I'll reach out to Mr. Fitzgerald how we do that.
That's it. Thank you. Any questions? All right. So moving on, the MCIU did meet on February 23rd, and I will be presenting at the next work session. PSBA, then also at the next work session. American Legion, Mrs. Sullivan, did you have anything to report tonight?
Yes, we had a meeting this past week Unfortunately, very few people were in attendance, so we didn't get really into any deep issues. Again, I raised issues with them about if they're interested in helping fund the Home and School Association. I don't think I'm not sure if this has been discussed before, but they're proposing RAM statues throughout the school district, much like Boyertown has. Nothing is final on this yet because we have to look at fundraising to pay for them, locations for them. But the American Legion is very interested in helping to support one of these statues if we proceed with that. They're losing some money because on the fence advertising issue, a lot of the people businesses in the local area that contribute money to this, they pay for ads and they haven't been paying. So their budget is less than it normally is. And unfortunately, they're having a great deal of difficulty recruiting young students for the baseball league. It looks like, don't know how much longer that's going to last because so many of the other clubs in the area and the school districts, et cetera, are taking up, boys and girls that want to play baseball outside of the school district, within the league region. So we're just going to wait and see. They're bringing in some new people and some new recruitment materials, and we'll see how it goes from there. So, and I go to meetings every month. So at our next meeting, I'll be able to present some more update.
Thank you for that. What you were referencing with the Rams, just to remind people, that's the Booster Club fundraiser in which they're going to be selling the Ram statues. So that would be great if the American Legion is willing to help in any way. They are, a good friend to us, and anything we can do to help with the advertising or the recruiting for the baseball league, we appreciate that. Anybody have any questions or comments about that?
I do. I have, it's regarding the RAM project. So I know it's not specifically about the American Legion, but since Diane brought it up, I don't know. Is it okay to ask that now? So I guess I was planning on our next property meeting to bring it up because I know if a lot of the home and schools throughout the district are planning to purchase a RAM, there's conversations about concrete pads that may be needed for their installation. So rather than each home and school kind of having these conversations independently and trying to find a contractor to do it, I was hoping that we could discuss that at property, or somehow to try to find a way so that we're kind of doing it together. I would imagine all the schools, if they can, would have it. And then also talking about how some home and schools may be a little bit more active or have more access to funding than others. And so how we can make sure that all the schools feel included in that project.
Can I just give Aaron Crew a moment to kind of weigh in a little bit on that, Aaron?
Sure, we've been working on this, or at least the Booster Club has brought it to community relations just to be able to share with the Springford community. We've included information in the last few weekly updates, and they will be doing a short presentation in March at one of the meetings to share that information. Mr. Hunter has been involved since the start with the Booster Club and getting the information, though it is entirely the Booster Club's project. He will be working very closely with any of the school principals through any of the processes he does with playgrounds that home and schools might be donating, anything like that. He follows the same process. So that would more than likely go through his department directly if a school does decide to move forward with the purchase of one of the ramps.
Ms. Deodorff, you mentioned bringing it to property for what? What's the purpose of bringing it to property?
The Brook Home and School, we were talking about finding, needing to find a contractor or somebody to place this concrete pad and what the funding. So I was just thinking that if all of the schools would be needing something like this, you know, is it something that the school has, like that our facilities are able to do that project, or just kind of, if everybody's going to be working on the same sort of project to happen on our school property, should the home and school want it, to kind of combine efforts? I mean, or it could just not be a school thing at all, but it does, I mean, it is our property, so it does affect us in a sense.
That's correct. I mean, you can bring it to property. My shot from the hip would be that if a home and school association purchases a RAM, booster, home school, if they purchase it, they purchase the concrete pad also, but it's something
Right.
we can discuss. But I would prefer, or my recommendation would be that they purchase a complete turnkey operation, as opposed to the district getting involved and providing a non-structural pad, and then we're putting a RAM up on and something happens to it. I would just rather.
I just thought it would make sense to have a conversation about how all these RAMs are going to be coming up and.
Well, it's a worthwhile conversation. I've heard nothing about home and schools purchasing this. I've heard, I mean, Miss Sullivan brought it up. That's really my first time hearing about this RAM. But since everyone is aware of it except for me, what's the cost of this RAM?
I think they're $1,800.
They're 1,800, and the tech school has stepped in to help with putting a final finish on them. Each RAM can be, each school can paint their RAM in whatever way they want to. They don't all also have to be the same, but the tech school has offered to help with this.
Is this something that we could ask to have a presentation about so that we can get all the details right in terms of what's needed for pad site, what's needed for the painting, how much it costs and everything? Can we table that?
Fine with me, if we want to get, you know, a little bit more detail, or have somebody from the home and school come make a presentation, or Mr. Rizzo. Or
So we did have a lengthy discussion about this at community relations, right? And then there was some information and some chatter here about it at a different meeting. Mr. Jackson, maybe you weren't privy to, I don't know, maybe I thought you were here, so I don't know. But in any case.
We reserved 3 for your front yard.
In any case, we're having community relations again tomorrow night. So, and we also had a big discussion about this when we did the meeting with the Home and Schools and Booster and Music Association, when we were on that Zoom. So let's circle back tomorrow night at community relations and just touch base on it, and then bring back to the full board. The last we spoke about it, all of the final details weren't worked out yet, but they're coming. So let's check the progress on that and then get it back to the full board at that rate.
But why would this be a board issue?
It's not a board issue. It would just be to give you information. That's all.
It might be good to involve property, just because they work with concrete companies, and property could possibly say to them, here's who would give you the best deal or would do the best job. That I don't see any more involvement than that.
No, we're not getting involved in that. But if you want to bring the property and have a general conversation, that's fine. But okay.
Let's get the information. Let's
Right.
get an update
We'll
on the
get-
information.
Absolutely. We're going to get the information together with the meeting and provide that to everyone. So great. So if there's nothing else regarding the American Legion, then we're going to move on to the superintendent's report. Mr. Rizzo.
Yeah, I have a lot. No, I do. It's all good though, all good. I have a lot, LOT, all caps. All right.
I was able to read his lips, which is wonderful.
We feel connected, we're more connected. Yeah.
Are we all smiling?
First, it's been a really fantastic season for our athletic department. Excuse me. Indoor track team competed at states, which were held at Penn State University, and the following were medal winners. State champion in the high jump with a school record jump of 5 feet 8 inches, Nene Makanchu. Fifth place medalist in the girls shot put, Vanya Makanchu. Sixth place medal in the boys 4x200 meter relay, Travell Wellens, Justin Russell, Leo Aguilar, and Colby Basiliga. Wrestling won their 4th consecutive PIAA District 1 North Championship and advanced 8 wrestlers to the PIAA Regional this coming weekend. Advancing are gold medalists and their weight class: 106-pound Gus Smith, 113 pounds Cole Smith, 126-pound Quinn Smith, 152-pound Anthony Attillo. Second place medalist Dominic Ortlib at 120 pounds. Third place medalist Ryan Lepore at 145 pounds. Fourth place medalist Ryan Horvath at 172 pounds, and Kyle Houston at 189 pounds. Swimming at the PIAA District 1 meet, Ashley Gutschall, 6th place medal, qualified for PIAA state meet. Ashley Gutschall, Maris Sikowski, Sydney Kohler, and Abby Kohler, 5th place medal, and the relay team qualified for the PIAA state meet. And there may be other qualifiers, as we have to wait and see who hits the qualifying time from other PIAA districts. And lastly, girls basketball defeated Garnet Valley on Saturday by a score of 40-30, and will play Souderton on Wednesday, March 2nd at 6:00 p.m. in the PIAA District 1 semifinals. This is the 5th straight trip to the district semifinals for the girls team. A lot happening in athletics, so congratulations to all those athletes and their coaches. Yep. Next, I'd like to, once again, for combined years of service, 49 combined years of service, we want to congratulate our retirees, Joe Doherty, head custodian at the 8th grade center with 20 years of service. Yep. And Linda Riga, food services manager at Evans Elementary, 29 years of service. School calendars, another update on where we are. That is an agenda item for today. And if you want to get in a little deeper, when the motion comes up, that's fine. We did spend a lot of time working through a bunch of options. The singular focus was to end the school year as close to the, as soon as possible, since much of our mandated testing occurs in May, and students tend to maybe lose a little focus the longer we have school in June. We'll keep just a reminder that we will still have flexible instruction days to use for inclement weather. And as a reminder, the version we are bringing forward will both work with our recommendation being version 9B. That's our recommendation. The last thing in terms of one of the agenda items is resolution 520.1, and Mr. Fitzgerald, you might want to weigh in a little bit on this as well. Essentially what we're asking for, and this will be our 3rd year in a row signing this, the 520.1 resolution is necessary so we can receive our subsidy if we at any time might have to move our students to a virtual environment for any COVID related reasons during the 22-23 school year. We've signed, like I said, we've signed this the past 2 years. Do you have anything else you want to say about that?
Well, that was going to be my report, Colleen. Yes, the 520.1 emergency resolution, which is a section of the school code, is the mechanism in which PDE has indicated they will approve our hours for a given year. This was dictated originally by the previous Secretary Rivera. Secretary Ortega is using the same methodology. Ultimately, the secretary gets to approve that that our hours count and that we get our full subsidy. So this is not a suggestion that we are going to some sort of hybrid or virtual programming. It's just to assure our full subsidy next year. Just recall, especially for new board members, there is ongoing litigation between individual plaintiffs and the Department of Education as to what level of authority they were allowed to provide in terms of online and hybrid programming. That's been going on for 2 years, and there's really no end in sight on that. However, the secretary has indicated that this methodology will assure, and it has so far for the last couple of years, our subsidy for those hours.
I have one more item that I maybe should discuss for a couple of minutes. I did have 5 pages of stuff to share, which I won't. I'll only share 4. But I do want to give you, because there has been some question from the community as well as from the board. Now that we have our health and safety plan approved and having some metrics to determine whether or not we would ever want to reconsider some form of universal masking. So I want to share some numbers and kind of let you know where we are, and then I will need some direction, okay? First, I do track numbers daily. Today's 7-day total was 40.22, which is very low. It actually marks, I think, a 96.4% decrease from our highest day of 1,115.67, which was really only a month ago. Okay, or a month and a half. What I want to say is what we do know about this is over the last 2 years, there was a significant decline going into the summer compared to where we are right now. The vaccination rate in our county is 94% with at least 1 shot. I want to talk about the per 100,000. I'm actually getting to a point here. I'm just kind of sharing some things with you first. I want to talk about that per 100,000 number because over the last year, we've been waiting on Tuesdays to get a number from the county. And that number is what we call a lagging number, right? So that lagging number really involves the data, the daily numbers between the 12th day before that number and the 5th day before that number. So it's all a week to a week and a half old, right? So when we get a number, it's actually, I already know what the next number is going to be before it's even reported. So what I mean by that is, if we're going to consider any form of level of community transmission, I don't believe that's a good number because it's old data. I would much rather do the day-to-day number, which I collect. The 100,000 number, the per 100,000, I have some concerns about that I want to bring to the board's attention. First of all, it was effective in a way of comparing communities. But there's no real science behind that number at all. Whenever I asked why those numbers were where they were, 0 to 9, 10 to 49, 50 to 99, and 100 plus, nobody could give me a reason, nor could they point me in the direction where I could find any research to support that. So it's a number that was thrown out there, and that's great. It served a purpose, but I don't know that we should count on it as much as we do. And again, I mentioned the weekly number is a lagging number. So I would keep track of the regular numbers, which is Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And again, I wonder if this is even an antiquated system at this point based on what CDC has since recommended. Next, I want to just talk about contact tracing because currently we're contact tracing. I know some of those questions have come up. What I do know is based on the Montgomery County Office of Public Health and their health code, contact tracing and quarantining is a requirement. What is not clear is it our requirement or not, right? And we're hoping to get some clarity on that. We do have a meeting with Montgomery County tomorrow at 1 o'clock to get some information on how they are going to be interpreting CDC's guidance. We do know that they issued a statement today saying they were going to be following it. How exactly that pans out still remains to be seen. Moving on, CDC guidance that was released this past Friday, as I told you prior, it considers vaccination rates and hospitalizations rather than community transmission. And what I mean by that is they have an interesting system that there's actually 3 indicators. So the first indicator is whether your community transmission is greater or less than 200. If it's less than 200, then that gives you criteria for the second and third indicators. If it's equal to or greater than 200, then they have another set of indicators that you would follow. We are currently in medium. So what that means for us is with our current number of 126.01, which is 2 weeks old, 126.01, if we are less than 10, the 7-day total of new COVID-19 admissions per 100,000 population, right? So in 7 days, people admitted to the hospital for COVID per 100,000, and the indicators or the thresholds are this: less than 10, you're considered low. 10 to 19.9, you're considered medium. 20 and higher, you're considered high. The third indicator is a 7-day average of percent of staffed inpatient beds occupied by COVID-19 patients. And again, that number is less than 10% is low, 10 to 14.9% is medium, and 50% or higher is considered high. And what CDC does is whatever the higher of those two is what we are. We are high, we are medium for the second indicator because we have 11 new COVID-19 admissions per 100,000 population. When I say we, I mean Montgomery County, not Springford. They're going back to county numbers. Montgomery County is in low in the third indicator with 4.6%. Okay, keep that in mind. I am coming to my end. So, yeah. So then what I want to say next is, if you study the website, and again, it came out on Friday, I did the best that I could in a couple of days. They did have a few emails to return this weekend. What I would like to say is that there's a grid of what CDC recommends whenever you're in low, medium, and high. Okay, and there are two categories. There's individual and household level prevention behaviors, and then there's community level prevention strategies. Masking is listed when you're in high in the individual and household level prevention behaviors, not in the community level prevention strategies. And I think that's important to note. When you look at the CDC grid, my interpretation of it is they're placing the onus on whether you choose the mask or not on the family, not on the institution. So as we consider what we want to do, I think it's important, in my opinion, to appropriately interpret the CDC's grid. Now, excuse me. Next, let's talk about what is currently in our CDC, and then or what's currently in our health and safety plan, and then I'm open for questions if you have any. Want to first share that we did buy, and we now have on hand 2,000 KN95 masks. We bought those because we did know that there were some of our community, some of our students and our staff that are going to continue to choose the mask, and we support them in that, and we wanted to give them masks that passed muster. So we do have 2,000 of those in stock. Thank you, Chief and Mr. Fink, for making that happen. I also want to share that, again, some board members have expressed an interest in utilizing a metric to bring masks back should there be another spike. And other districts have explored this as well, and I have some examples that I can share with you. Some have thrown out numbers between 2.5% and 4% of their total population. Once you have that many positive cases, then you consider bringing back universal masking. Others have talked about if there is a confirmed in-school, what they're calling an outbreak or in-school transmission, then you consider strategic temporary masking for a few weeks, those types of measures. We can consider those things. And again, I go back to what the CDC is saying is if you're in high, they give you a list of things to put into place. So my ask to the board, do you want me to explore some form of metric for us to put in place if we start to experience what I consider to be another spike? And I started out by saying that the trend over the last 2 years going into the summer is that it will continue to drop down. That being the case, I'm not feeling a sense of urgency. And quite frankly, I don't know that I'm feeling a need, but I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to try and play doctor. I'm just looking at the numbers and interpreting it the best that I can. So that's where I need some direction from the board. If you could help give me some guidance and my team some guidance. As it is right now in the health and safety plan, the only real difference in the health and safety plan is we compacted all the levels of transmission, and you've had a chance to review that, compacted all the levels of transmission and changed it to the CDC designation, low, medium, and high. And we added in mask to stay and test to stay, so that it was memorialized in that document. Things that we have been doing, nothing new, just organizing a little bit. And we took out the 2-week transmission. Those are the changes that I shared with you over the weekend. Beyond that, it's really pretty much the same document. So any guidance you can provide would be great. I don't think there's an urgency to talk about it tonight. If you give me some direction, I can bring something back at the work session in 3 weeks.
So thank you very much for that. Thank you for all that information. And I think people can play it back, the video, like in slow, and maybe understand some of it. No, I think that's my plan. I know you had expressed something about that there was more information forthcoming, you believe, from the CDC in the county and that other districts have, as they start in Montgomery County to put into place changes to their health and safety plan. You have some of that, but you anticipate that there'll be more that you could look at. Is that correct?
Sure. So over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of updates to health and safety plans as they began planning moving towards some form of mask optional scenario. There was some scrambling over the weekend when CDC released their 4 o'clock in the afternoon guidance. So I will be happy to report back after I go to the meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock with Montgomery County, just to get their take on what they're going to be recommending and bring those thoughts back to the board via board memo and reporting out here at the board meeting.
All right, so I think we have if the board, any of the board want to comment on this, but I think what we're asking for is we're looking for is whether we want Mr. Rizzo to get some more information about this and bring that back to us for considerations to whether we wanted to put into place something if the numbers were to go up at some point. So this wouldn't be a vote, this would just be board direction, I believe. So any questions though?
First, thanks, Mr. Rizzo. It's very thorough, and I can't imagine, I know how many emails we got this weekend, so I can only imagine how many you got. Yeah, I do think we need to be proactive about this. I believe the numbers will continue to go down, but I don't want to be reactionary. I want to have a plan in place. I know the numbers could change, the recommendations could change, but I think it's important very, very important for us to be proactive.
And I agree. And the thing is, with this virus, as we've seen now for 2 years, the rates go down as the weather warms up, and they go up as the weather gets cold again in the fall, because that's how the virus survives.
Okay, so I would also say kudos for getting those masks, and I'm hoping that they're going to make the people that do want to wear the mask feel more comfortable. And as it was pointed out, they're two-way protection. So I think we could be proactive and just continue to acquire masks and make them available to anyone that wants them, since they have that two-way protection. Just a thought, but I'm very happy that you've already got those. And are those available at this time if any student wanted those?
Well, currently, I think they're in Chief's office to be dispersed. They did come in today. Yeah.
Super, thanks.
And Mr. Rizzo, if coming out of those meetings with Montgomery County, if we can, I know you go through the numbers really quickly, so it's kind of, I try to, if it's possible, if there's any guidance, if we could put that on a slide, I'd be happy to put that together just so that people can understand it. If it's a chart, a grid, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be as complicated as a dashboard, but just so.
I have been working on talking slower.
No, I got it.
It's not worked.
Thank you.
I'm getting there.
I do have a couple questions regarding kind of the switch over to the CDC guidance versus whatever we've been doing. When does the CDC recommend community level mitigation?
The CDC still has low, medium, and high, and they mention things that should be done in each of those designations. It's just that masking doesn't appear in any of them. Correct. Only in the individual level.
So at no point in their guidance with their designations do they say to have community level masking?
Correct. And
Okay.
based on my weekend review of that, yes.
And so if we were to adopt this guidance, which I know we're looking for more guidance tomorrow from the county, but just for information so we can talk, this is where we can talk and ask these questions. I guess I'm curious to know, even though I'm somebody that did bring this point up, why we would then adopt something separate from that that's unique to us about when to bring them back. So, right, is that kind of, it would be our own spring forward decision that's not necessarily in alliance with what the CDC has recommended.
That would be correct. And again, I want to see where, again, we have been following Montgomery County, and Montgomery County has been informed by CDC and by CHOP. So we tend to take our guidance from Montgomery County. So I am curious, I think it's important for me to hear what they have to say tomorrow, but your assessment is correct.
So I would be hesitant to create our own, if the goal has been to follow them, I would be hesitant to then create our own spring forward. We can do this when, is my feedback. And then I also recall from previous meetings, Mr. Fitzgerald, where you recommended or said we do need to at some time speak about sunsetting the health and safety plan. So since I'm new to the board, is the health and safety plan a COVID document, or is that something prior to COVID we had before?
No, it's a PDE document really, and it's a federal subsidy document really. So your health and safety, the original one in 2020 was a little different, but the one this year was guided by what PDE required, that be submitted by, I think, July 30th or something to that effect, as well as it was crafted in a way to align to the requirements with our, I think, ESSER $3, that we had a health and safety plan in place, and that I wouldn't so much suggest we have to sunset it so much as revisit it as circumstances change. And that's actually part of the requirement of the ESSER dollars. So for instance, we got the CDC recommendations on Friday at 4 o'clock. We're meeting tonight at 7:30. I don't think there's any expectation that any of us are going to be terribly knowledgeable on the impact on our plan right now. However, probably in March, it would probably be in the board's best interest to revisit the specific changes and how applicable it should or will be for us for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. I don't know what PD is going to do in June, but I suspect they are going to give us a template that looks very similar to the one we got this past June to put another plan in place on some level. I suspect it will be different with regard to the specific questions that were asked in that plan. But I do anticipate, in light of the 520.1 resolution that we have this evening, that PD is going to probably play the same song and dance again in June.
So you do anticipate us needing to have a health and safety plan for next year?
For next year, yeah, my guess is PD is going to require it of all 500 school districts.
Okay, I think that's fine.
Any other questions?
I would just say I would agree that there's no sense of urgency right now to make a decision on whether we ask Mr. Rizzo to bring back some options, because I think we should do kind of what Mr. Fitzgerald just mentioned, which is let's wait to hear what Montgomery County has to say, and then maybe revisit this at the work session in March. And we may need to revisit it in April, but as long as we get it right, I don't see a sense of urgency.
Mr. Rizzo, just one board member's opinion. Whatever time you may invest in doing this, I plead you to spend it on improving academics here. Quit, no more. Just let's focus our energies on the students.
I'll follow suit with Mr. Schaefer from a different perspective. Mr. Rizzo, thank you for that report. In past years, we've always acknowledged our students' achievements. And, I listened to what you mentioned regarding the athletic ability of some of our kids. And one in particular, and hopefully Mr. McDaniel will do something to put some highlights on these students. Like Nene, I'm gonna butcher her name, but Makanzu. She won the state high jump at 5'8", but she is ranked 4th in the country. It's 331 million people in this country, and she's 4th in the country. And we need to get back to acknowledging the things that our kids do on an academic and on an athletic level. I sided with my neighbor here. Let's enjoy. I am very happy sitting here and not doing this. It just feels good. So I would like to enjoy this moment. At some point in time, we can address the opposite of what we did tonight. But I think for right now, let's try to enjoy this moment. That's it.
And I'll just say too that, the athletics, the academics, the athletics, and the musical. So we can get that Mamma Mia presentation or redo at the end of March. That would be awesome.
That's that same song and dance Mr. Fitzgerald was talking about, I think, right?
Yeah. The song and dance.
Yeah.
I did, just for housekeeping, so the DECA program was slated to present to us last week when we adjourned. So when can we expect to be able to let them come back and do that presentation?
It's a good point. let me talk with Ms. Crew, because we have actually built out the rest of the year in terms of presentations, representing all of our buildings, all of our levels, our students. So let me talk with her and see what we can get worked out there.
All right, so
Sorry.
Oh.
I have a question about the graduation date. Do you want me to wait till the calendar for that?
yes, or that or board comment, wherever, or the calendar. Yes. So it sounds to me, if I'm looking at the board, that when Mrs. Earl, did you want to weigh in also?
I was just wondering why we didn't have the student representatives give a report. Was it on the agenda?
And again, that one's on me. Whenever we met last week and we talked about the length of the meeting, I just figured anything like that I would roll into mine and share and spare them that. So that's on me.
All right, so it seems to me from the input that I've gotten from the board that we are interested in hearing what information the CDC may have in Montgomery County, but not with a sense of urgency and not with anything that, to really take this moment to kind of focus on moving ahead. So if that's the direction, then Mr. Rizzo, that we are interested in you gathering information, but not any sense of urgency, not that you need to bring anything back at this, at the meeting next if you don't feel that is necessary.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Solicitors report, Mr. Fitzgerald.
I have no report.
Question. I have a question for you regarding, I know we spoke about addresses for public comment.
Yeah.
So I thought that we said people don't have to.
They do not. They do not.
So in our announcements, and I think when our communications team answers those calls, and also in the video, it states that about the address. So if that's not the case, could we update that, please?
Yeah, we began that kind of on a casual basis back in late November, and that would be, we would just need their township or town of residence within the district.
All right, I will try and remember to say that on all my notes here, but thank you very much for bringing that up.
And I don't have the policy immediately in front of me. If the policy requires the commenter to note their address, we should send it back to modify it and then bring it back for revision.
Thank you, Mrs. Earl. I hope you noted that. All right, so if there's no more reports here, we're going to move on to the agenda here. We're looking at, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? That is my Roman numerals, 4A through C. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second? Second, Mrs. Weingarten. All those in favor say aye. Oh, I'm sorry. Comment, was there any comment first? Apologize. Thank you. All right, if not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Moving on to personnel, A through I. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a motion?
Second.
And Mrs. Earl, second. Are there any comments, board discussion, questions or comments?
Just a minor, so in an E, we don't list where the funding is coming from. I'm assuming this will be reimbursed out of from our ESSER funds, given that this is for after school tutoring, which again, thanking the professional staff for doing this, but just it's not listed.
It is. It does come from the ESSER funds that are set aside specifically for after-school tutoring.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Passes. Moving on to finance. Finance A through G. Is there a motion?
So moved. We have to pay bills.
A second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
I just can't resist. I meant to ask you, Dr. G, about this. The Zoom counseling, is that part of the efforts to bring those evaluations up to par, along with a number of the other things here to complement what the MCIU was doing for us. Right,
Yes.
okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Just questions on D1 through, looks like 1 through 3. So this is just sort of for information purposes, right? There's no budget impact because this is compliments of our wonderful homeschool, right?
That's correct.
So thank you to those organizations. Thank you.
Very nice thought, yes. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Jackson? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Property, into property, A through D.
Separate D.
D, separating D. So property A through C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I was gonna suggest to separate A. I have a comment on that. Can we do that now that it's been second?
We
can.
can
Yep.
Okay.
separate out A. So right now, we are voting on B and C. So is there a motion for B and C?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion on, or questions on B and C?
A, I think it's,
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so under property B and C, so moved. Now going back to property A, do we have a motion?
So moved.
A second? Second. Any questions or discussions on property A?
I wanted to call this out because I know that there was some discussion at the property meeting specifically about Oaks Elementary. And, you know, I know that all of these repairs that are listed here in A through D are targeted repairs that were planned in advance and within budget. So my concern is not about that, but one thing I was going to mention in board comment is that Karen, Abby, and I had an opportunity to tour some of the buildings in February as new school board members. And in talking to administration and visiting some of these facilities, it became very apparent that there are likely some additional needs with regards to Oak that sound like we should be expecting a conversation around that. So Mr. Jackson, I just wanted to understand from your perspective to what extent, I mean, I've heard something like even in March hearing about some of these things. To what extent is that going to be something that we discuss in the next month or so?
Ms. Hermans, I'm totally at a loss. You guys asked to discuss A, right?
Correct.
This is about chillers.
No.
I'm sorry, masonry.
It's masonry. So we know that we're going to be getting, you know, the bricks are popping, the doing their caulk joints. That all is totally on board. But I know that, you know, in touring the building and discussing with Mr. Moyer and administration when we did that, that it sounds like that Oaks Elementary is going to be something that we talk about further in terms of like just broader needs from a facility standpoint. To what extent do you know that that will be coming up soon?
There is the ICS report, which details every building in the district and the needs that we've determined between the next 5 and 10 years. That's a plan that we put together where we've identified, and I'm going to use COVID, the high and the lows, the needs versus the wants. We address it on a yearly basis. So if there is something that the administration at Oaks is concerned about, they can forward it to the property committee. But I'm not going to know exactly what their particular issues are unless it's conveyed to us. No, I have not heard from anyone at Oaks about anything.
Sorry, I didn't use my mic. I was wondering if anything was conveyed. Okay.
I think that Mr. Hunter and his group have done a fantastic job putting that 239-page document together that all board members should read and understand and see what the costs are and see what the issues are. So if it's something within there, they can it can be brought to property and we will evaluate it to see where it falls in line. If it's something that's detrimental, we can address it right away. But I will defer to Mr. Hunter because I have not heard anything.
Mr. Jackson, I would also like to add that ICS Consulting is currently working on our updated demographic and enrollment numbers. That's going to be shared with us shortly as well. So that might be part of the conversation as well that I think that was brought up. But we'll certainly have updated demographic and enrollment within the next 30 days that can help us as far as maybe put some of the conversation at ease at the school.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter.
Was that part of the conversation? Demographics, growth versus?
That was part of it. There was broader issues.
Yes, the square footage over there is fully occupied. And we're very much aware of that.
All right. Any other comments or questions about property A?
I'll just comment that I separated D, and I mentioned this earlier about the funds being replenished, but it really applies to all of A, B, C, and D. So are we going to have an adjustment to the language on those, or would we have to just that the funds would be replenished or not? Or are they going to be, or are they not?
It is the intent for those funds to be refurnished. This is what the board hears me voice concerns about on a regular basis. We have to address the needs of our district, no different than you address the needs of your home that you live in. It's an investment, and we have to reinvest within our school districts, which allows our teachers, staff to perform their duties and our kids to be in a very productive environment. And I will continue to harp on that, but yes, these funds will have to be replaced.
And I'm fine with that, and I agree with you on all that, but do we have, Mr. Fitzgerald, do we have to change the language then to include that or no?
I wouldn't tonight. This is an action item to make this expenditure. To the extent that we want to replenish monies in the capital reserve, that should likely come through the budgeting process this spring, where Mr. Fink can bring that money through the capital reserve, back into the capital reserve.
Perfect, thank you. So I don't have any other comments on D either, if you want to take A and D together, unless anybody.
That's why it's good to chair finance and property.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to take A and D together though, because I have a motion and a second, but thank you very
Oh,
much. We'll go
okay.
ahead and do.
That's right.
So if there's no other questions or comments, we have the motion for property A and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. On to property D. Do I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
Are there any questions or concerns regarding D? All right, so since there are none at this time, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So property D passes. And so that moves us on to programming and curriculum, A through G. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to separate F.
Separate which one?
F.
F, separating out F.
Separate B and G.
B as in boy.
B as in
and
boy.
G as in
Get clarity.
goat. Let's go with that. All right. So we've separated out B, F, and G. Do I have a motion on A, C, D, E?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Discussion or questions?
Dr. Murray, can you just explain to me one more time regarding the learning for French 2 and 3? I'm sorry.
We have a motion and a second on A, C, D, and E. Any questions on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So A, C, D, and E pass. Now we are looking at, is there a motion for B, for programming and curriculum B?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Mr. Jackson, we'll start with you.
Dr. Murray, can you guys, and I apologize, can you explain this to me one more time?
Absolutely. I will let Beth Lees talk about the personnel aspect of this. But this is currently, proximity learning is the program that we use currently for our Chinese programming. And we are looking at, we propose this so that we have a backup. We're currently trying to find staffing so that we don't need this, but we don't want to wait an entire month. Should that come into play, we are having a difficult time finding a sub with the proper certification, which would be French certification. We may have some plans in place to be able to do that. This is certainly not ideal, but this is a plan B so that we're not stuck.
All right, thank you.
And also on that, would that be for the remainder of the year or just until you were able to like, what's the plan?
So the plan would be until our full-time staff comes back. I don't remember the time off the top of my head, but maybe Beth can speak to that.
Sure. The staff member is due back in early April. We do have somebody in the process of getting on board to be a substitute. All lessons have been posted on Canvas. Our excellent world language department is doing everything they can to provide the information to the students at this current point. This proximity learning is simply a backup plan if the sub falls through.
Since this was separated, would it be appropriate for all affirmative votes to be we? Should I work on that?
No, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. All right, any other questions or comments regarding programming and curriculum B?
What? Oh,
If,
yeah.
all right. So all those in favor, please give an affirmative.
We.
We. Any opposed? None opposed, so that passes on to programming and curriculum F. Do we taking F and G together or were F and G separate? Separate, so we are looking at F. And is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Questions or comments?
I have a comment about this because this is something that when I observed the curriculum and technology meeting last month was highlighted, and I thought it was a great news story. So just in the same spirit of acknowledging student achievement, I think acknowledging our administration for really taking the efforts to take information in and ultimately save our district some money. So Mr. Catalano, I don't know if you're on the line, but you did a great job talking about Trust Ed, how you attended a conference, and basically took in a very concrete example of, how we're able to vet our applications and our website compliance here in the district and really avoid a manual process I know has taken your team a lot of time. So can you just share with the community exactly like how, oh, he's not?
No, I don't know. He's there.
Oh, okay, great. If you could just share, because I know that sometimes when it comes to attending conferences, there's questions on whether it's a worthwhile activity for our administration and our staff, and I just wanted to highlight this specific example.
Thank you. I was lucky to attend the FETC conference a couple weeks ago, Future Education Technology Conference. I was able to experience quite a few sessions that were very beneficial to me. One session in particular was on security and compliance of applications in the district. And during this session, this company, IMS Global, has the product that is on for approval tonight, Trust Ed Apps. They evaluate all applications used in the education setting for compliance in 5 categories, as I showed at the Technology and Committee. And this will help expedite our process of verifying our hundreds of applications that we use for compliance on all the different categories that we need. And we'll also be able to publish this to our website for access to the entire district to see which applications are able to be used and which ones can't. And then if by any chance ones aren't able to be used, they can show the staff member exactly why it's not able to be used in compliance. And then perhaps we can get the vendor to fix it if it's an application we choose to use in the future. This will expedite the process for us incredibly and save us a lot of time and make sure everything's compliant the way it needs to be.
Mr. Catalano, can you put that in perspective and tell us how you manage, what, thousands of different applications on an Excel spreadsheet and how this would change the perspective?
Yeah, currently we have to go through an manual process and evaluate all the legal contracts along with our solicitor to make sure they're compliant for FERPA, HIPAA, COPPA, and this will expedite the process for us and free up staff members to do other things. And again, we'll have a clear, concise website, as I showed in committee, that shows the 5 categories, what it is compliant for, what it's not compliant for. So again, if there's any, like say a staff member were to request an application and we were to deny it, they could see specifically why it wasn't able to be used. And we're currently doing this in a manual process on an Excel sheet that we share through the district. And this will have a clear, concise description of all the applications and how they're compliant and what's able to be used for the district and to make sure all of our student data is safe.
Thank you.
All right, 2 simple questions here regarding F. There is a 1-year agreement. What happens on year 2, year 3, and year 4? Are there additional costs going forward? Are there additional licensings required? I'm trying to understand, it does great things, but we only have a 1-year agreement. What happens after the first year?
It's a membership, Clinton, and then we would just renew it. They only do it on a year-to-year basis. This company doesn't seem to be looking for to charge exorbitant amounts. It's a yearly membership fee, and I have it in my operating budget moving forward.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments regarding programming and curriculum F? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. On to programming and curriculum G. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Questions or comments?
So this is where I was going to jump in about the, I see that on FNG, actually, there's going to be the replenishment from the technology budget. But what about, I'd like to know the total or where we are at in terms of what is owed back, because they've had to do that quite a bit over the past chunk of time. So where are we at in terms of that number that has to go back to cap?
I don't know. I don't know where we are. Over the last 2 years, I know we've released a lot of funding for devices. So,
Some of that was ESSER.
yeah. I mean, I would like to see a detail of what, of the refresh. I mean, right now, we're saying we're going to purchase 700 Chromebooks for $366,000. What's the cost for the Chromebooks? What's the cost for ADP? And what's the cost for the licensing? And what's happening to the, I'm going to say the 700 that we're replacing? So there needs to be a detailed analysis of where we are. I don't know anymore. I really don't know right now. As far as the purchases, as far as the overall refresh, I would think that's something that curriculum and technology could provide us.
Yes, we absolutely, information that we could get and present for the board. But in the meantime, I don't know if Mr. Catalano has answered any of those questions.
These are for 5th grade students. So every child will have a device. The devices in grades K to 4 stay in the classroom. The devices 5 to 12 go home with these students. All the other kids got them this year. So these will be just next year for the 5th grade students. The reason I have it on this month is there's a 4 to 6 month lead time for these devices in order to have them for the students in late August, early September. There would be a need to buy these now. But this is part of our plan for every student to have a device. And the devices that they're currently using in 4th grade stay in the classroom because those devices only go home on an as needed basis, where the devices grades 5 to 12 stay with the student for 4 years.
Thank you.
And Mr. Catalano, do you have a ballpark on that number that technology is going to replenish the capital reserve? Because I know, as I just said, there was some money that was drawn out of ESSER for the devices, and then there was other money that's been promised back to that account. Do you have a ballpark of that? Or is that something that we're going to see in the budget as well? Where are we on that?
I believe Mr. Fink is going to weigh in right now.
So, Mrs. Zowski, those are things we contemplate in the annual budget. Currently, with all devices that we purchase for technology, for capital reserve and those types of things are factored into our annual budget. As we buy these, for example, we will replenish the capital reserve over the 4 years, the useful life of those devices. Prior to myself being here, and of course, Mr. Catalano, we used to lease those products at a 3.5% to 4% interest rate, while we had plenty of funds in our capital reserve earning 0.25%. So the negative arbitrage made it very simple math to buy these products on our own and then replenish them through by replenishing through the operating budget into the capital reserve rather than paying exorbitant interest costs to a third party.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and are there any other questions or comments regarding programming and curriculum G? Hey, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Moving on to conferences and workshops, A through J. Is there a motion?
So second.
And a second. Any questions or discussion? All right, in that case, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes. On to other business. So I'd like to separate A. So
I would also like to separate B and D 22.
separating A, B, and D 22. So we are looking for a motion on C, D 1 to 21 and D 23, E 1 to 10. Is there a motion?
I have a question.
Wait, is there a motion right? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, questions or comments?
On policy 304, I know that there was some concern about changes or a lack of changes to that policy because it has been a standing, so to speak, policy for Springford for quite some time. And I understand that no changes were made to it. And yet it does not look the same as the previous version of 304 that I had read. So I don't know if Wendy can explain.
We're rescinding this policy.
But is it being replaced?
Yes, Ms. Sullivan, there was a earlier version that was modified, I think a month ago. As a result of that action by the board, the old iteration of 304 is being retired.
Okay,
That's what the action of the board would be.
I just wanted to be clear on that.
The issue with a lot of these, we have 300, 400, and 500 series policies that were redundant because they address teachers, administrators, and staff. So what's happening is we're combining them all. So it's just one series of policies that address all three. So we're going to see a lot of these policies being retired, and then they've been reworded to make sure that it addresses all employees, not dividing them up separately.
Okay.
Yeah, Mrs. Earl, having served on that committee years ago, Thank you for your leadership and administration. This is like watching paint dry. But it's good to be making sure that our policies are modernized and make sense. And if we can shrink the number, that's even better. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
On item C, I ask this question every time this comes up. Exactly what is the board approving?
Board approval is required for us to participate in the foreign exchange program.
I ask the same question every year. I get the same answer, which I don't support. Yeah.
All right. So if there are no other questions or comments, we are voting on other business. C, D 1 through 21 and D 23 and E 1 through 10. All those, yes, I did. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. So now we are back to A, other business A. So the administration recommends approval of 2022-2023 school calendar attached. So at this moment, are we looking at which calendar to put in there?
Ms. Crew, can we get that projected? The board asks if we can get calendar 9B projected.
So, and Mr. Fitzgerald, I may be looking to you for this. If there have been two calendars that were presented to the board. One is the recommendation of the superintendent, the one that we're going to show. So at what point do we are we going just with his recommendation based on what the board says here, or how do we do this?
Well, I presume we're going to see what the two options are after, I guess, a brief discussion in that regard. If there's a desire to select one, somebody can put a motion out for option 1 or option 2, and we'll see if there's a second, and then we'll go from there. So I would say let's see and this has happened here many years in the past. We have multiple options, and then somebody says, let's go with option 1. So I think we should see the presentation, and then somebody can make a motion.
And we are grateful. We're down to 2 options. Thank you.
Well, just for the sake of expediency, we've all seen these calendars. We've had them all weekend. The administration is recommending 9B. I make a motion that we go with 9B.
I second.
Thank you. I mean, what difference does it make to us? I mean, like, if you have one holiday on this day or the other day, it makes a difference to the administrators. It doesn't make any difference to us. So why don't we just vote for what they want?
Okay, so I'm hoping that we can still, like I said, Lisa, get the calendar up there so the community can see. However, Mr. Fitzgerald.
You have a motion. You have a motion on the table now.
Okay, so there is a motion on the table and a second for 9B, correct? I'm saying it the right way. Are there questions or comments regarding 9B?
I'm going to play adversary. I'm going to say I want to see it.
I want to hear it
on the screen. Oh, we've been able to see that all week, but.
So are these questions and comments regarding her motion?
Well, no, I mean,
because I have questions and comments.
Well, so
regarding
there's a motion and a second on the table, but it doesn't prevent, obviously, for Mr. Rizzo from showing the options and a discussion on the substance here.
Right, you can always vote against it, but let's move on.
All right. Can we vote on Maggie's, or sorry, not Maggie, on Mrs. Earl's motion?
Well, we're waiting.
We have to have discussion on it.
Member to have it.
But it
put
opens up
there.
discussion either way, is what Mr. Fitzgerald just said. So she's trying to limit, I'm not saying you're trying to limit discussion, but for expediency. So if we're able to discuss
You're
now
able
or
to
discuss
discuss.
there, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, I would listen. You can discuss anything now because if there's an approval of it, then it ends at all discussion. So I would suggest if there's a discussion on all the options, we do it right now. Because if there's a positive vote, then we move on.
Right. So, Mr. Rizzo, maybe you could just oh, there it is, but maybe you could just highlight the differences so the board fully understands and the community hears also. The real quick highlights. Thank you.
So that's it?
Okay, that's it.
No, okay, sorry, we're getting late. So a couple of things, you know, I solicited input from our administrative team, from our association leadership. And we pulled together so a list of items that we wanted to see, a list of items that we were willing to let go. And again, our primary goal was to initially to begin observing some holidays in a more diverse way. So you'll see that Eid is on there for April 21st. You'll see that on October 24th, we're observing Diwali. And instead of just observing those days, we took a deeper dive into our school calendar, found there were some barriers that we could not overlook. We looked at the possibility of doing away with having students be off on the election days. That was not an option. We needed to have at least one of those being in service day when it was. And the other one was valuable for us to have, but in the end, there were really no working models where we had polls in our buildings the same times we had students. So I didn't have a model to go off of. And one of the concerns that the board has in the past indicated was being able to ensure the separation between people coming in to vote and the student body when they're in school. So that kind of took that off the table. And I did work with the county on that to see what options were there. We looked at parent-teacher conferences to see if we could work anything around, work any information around there, or work any adjustments around there. Wasn't a whole lot of flexibility we could really put in there. We looked at that week before Thanksgiving. There was some concern about that being the whole week off. Some community members have mentioned that in the past. We didn't see a whole lot of value in having one student day on the 21st. We felt like that wouldn't be terribly valued. So it was either go all the way up until that Wednesday or having 2 days of student instruction or not. So we tended to err on the side of let's kind of stick with what's in place. We did pull some things away from our spring break. We did take off the April 10th, but we preserved the rest of the break. We did add January 2nd in, which is kind of the trend that we have done for winter break, so that we could have essentially more of a 10-day break instead of a really shorter 9-day break, to try and, again, put those breaks in so our students can refresh a little bit. In the future, I would like to at least have a discussion at some point about possibly starting earlier. I don't believe our community is ready at this point to start earlier, even though I feel like we actually, one of our versions really had us done before Memorial Day for the year, which would have been fantastic, but it would have been a very, very condensed school year. And I don't know that we're ready for that either. So all to say is I think this is a blend of kind of the things we were looking at doing educationally, but still we felt like could be supported by the board, by the community, and by our association. So that's why we're bringing 9B. If you would want to look at the other option, we have a lot of reservations about it. You asked for 2. I brought you a really good 1 and an average 2 that isn't going to make everybody happy. So I think this one should make everybody more or less happy. Questions?
This is 9B.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion?
Does 9B reflect a change in the date for graduation from what was previously given to the community? Was the date previously?
This will be graduation 2023, not this year. You mean next year?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments? All right, so the motion is the administration recommends approval of the 2022-2023 school calendar version 9B. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. We are on to other business B. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay. Questions or comments?
I have a question because we got an email that I sent to you, forwarded to you, that somehow they said we announced that it was June 9th. In my recollection, this whole year, we never put out a graduation date. This is the first that it's coming out with the days that follow as rain dates, correct?
Correct. We have not come forth with any official date for graduation at all. Dr. Collier and I talked a while back about Wednesday, June 8th being the most appropriate date, primarily because of with our situation with COVID, instead of having an indoor option, we wanted to have a couple of rain date options after. So we picked Wednesday, the 8th, knowing that we have the 9th and the 10th at our disposal if we needed it. Sticking with an outside. So there's never been a 9th on the calendar.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, if not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes. On to other business, D22. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second? Any questions or comments?
So I specifically pulled this one out because at the end of the meeting, the January 24th meeting, there was some questions around how Springford could be retiring or rescinding a policy like exit interviews when there were 21 resignations that were listed on that agenda. And specifically, when Springford is trying to promote an inclusive culture, a culture shift, that, it didn't really make sense. So I thought it would be important for Mrs. Lease to clarify that really a little bit of what Ms. Earl said, which is when we see that these policies are coming up to be rescinded or to be retired, it's not that we're doing away with the best practices. We are simply consolidating, removing redundant policies, streamlining policies for the purposes of, like we talked about, consolidating the 300s, the 400s, the 500s. So Ms. Lease, could you just clarify for the community that we are in fact doing exit interviews at Springford?
Yes, we've been doing exit interviews. We're going to continue to do exit interviews for anybody who desires one. Anybody who provides us a notice of resignation or retirement, we start the offboarding process. And one of those initial pieces is an invitation for an exit interview, either in person or Zoom with me. I would say about 95% of the employees do take me up on that. For those who do not wish to meet in person or do a Zoom interview, we do provide a form for the employee to complete, should they wish to do so, that they can get back to me so we can gather their feedback.
Okay. So as we move forward with, seeing these retirements, I just want the community to know that the best practices are not being retired, right? If it makes good business sense, Springford is doing that. This is simply logistics and consolidation.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Okay, so that is the voting portion here. We do have an informational section there that states that the administration acknowledges the acceptance of the donation of $28,767 from the Evans Elementary Home and School Association to be used towards the purchase of playground equipment. I believe that this is part of the inclusive playground that had been discussed earlier. And I think that we all can take that moment to acknowledge what an extraordinary gift this is for all of our students and for many, many years to come. So thank you very much for that, Evans. Yes, I think that deserves it. That's a lot of work from the community. So that we move on then to board comment. So at this time, is there any board comment?
I do have a comment. And maybe this goes to Mr. Schaefer, or Mr. Fitzgerald. The superintendent.
I'll take it. It's fine.
The superintendent evaluation and the assistant superintendent's evaluation, are we moving along with that? I know you wanted that done, I believe, in March. Are we making some headway there?
Yes, Mr. Rizzo will be thoroughly evaluated. And now that I feel like we're getting back to sort of regular business here, I sincerely look forward to getting together with you, Bob, and going through that. We've made a tremendous investment in terms of contemporizing that process so that there's more of a, I believe when I came on the board A few years ago, it seemed like it was extremely subjective. And so, yes, so if you would like to place that on next month's agenda, we'll see about providing an official update there. Mr. Fitzgerald, is that okay?
That goes to the assistant superintendents as well. Weren't we going to lend that rubric that we created for their evaluation also? Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, yeah, we talked about this back in November when we were looking at the restructuring. So consistent with Mr. Rizzo's contract and the law for our 2 assistant superintendents who are commissioned officers, we would need to have those goals publicly posted as well.
Was your date March? I couldn't recall. Was it?
I don't know with Mr. Rizzo, but certainly with the 2 new assistant superintendent positions, we needed time to decide what the goals should be. Especially with the new board coming on. And then this should be done annually. So if we do goals for the remainder of the 21-22 school year, that's fine. But then come July or August, I would suggest we start looking at a new annual goals for them.
So when I call a meeting, I look forward to seeing you there, Colleen.
I'm not on that committee anymore. But
Any other board comment?
Yes, I have board comment. A couple of things that I didn't get the opportunity to say last week with regards to number 1, building tours. So I made reference earlier that Karen, Abby, and I had the opportunity to tour the district and observe learning firsthand, meet with staff. And I want to specifically thank the administration, Mr. Rizzo and Dr. Murray and Dr. G for hosting us, but also Mr. Moyer, Mrs. Choi, Mr. Siggins, Mr. Rogers, and Dr. Collier, and a special thanks to Dr. Bignati at Limerick Elementary, who not only gave us the tour, included some student presentations, which were amazing to watch, but also hosted us for lunch. So thank you to the Limerick Food Services staff for being gracious hosts that afternoon, because I know that not only were you serving us, but you were also serving the 1st grade or 2nd grade students. So thank you for that. The other comment I wanted to make was regard to our school police department. So, at this point, I think we're all trying to move forward from what happened last week, but I don't want to overlook our school police for their response to last Monday's meeting. And specifically, I did reach out to Chief Boyer and his team of 8. I've told Chief Boyer time and time again since coming on and taking this position that I have been extremely impressed with all of the responsibilities that frankly I wasn't even aware of coming into this role that his team takes on day in and day out, not just to promote school safety, but also to just promote a positive, interactive, a positive environment for our students. So I want to thank Chief Boyer. I want to thank specifically Lieutenant Phillips for the professionalism and the preparedness that they showed in terms of escorting us out the building and being responsive to that. So thank you to our school police team.
Is there any other board comment at this time?
Follow up to a couple things Ms. Herman said. We used to have board attend classroom day, where the board would go and spend the entire day in a classroom or a couple of classrooms. That way you got a true feel of what teachers deal with, what the staff deals with. We were not allowed, we were not chauffeurly driven around the campus. We had to spend time in the classroom. And maybe it's something we should reinstitute. That way you really get a sense of what happens in the school district on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comment from the board at this time?
I have one additional comment, and it's actually really not a comment as much as a question for Dr. Rizzo, because going back to some of the comments that I've made today, just to provide clarity to the community, I think there was a lot of questions that came up with regards to whose responsibility is it to create an agenda. And I just think that moving forward, as other issues will come up and, there'll be strong opinions on both sides. Could you provide a little clarity with regards to how that process happens and ultimately whose responsibility that falls on?
Absolutely. So one of the primary relationships that exists between the board and the administration is the president of the board and the superintendent. They work collaboratively on building the agenda. And what that means for us here at Springford is we have many departments. We have we have our cabinet members. Our cabinet members are responsible for making sure that the day-to-day business continues to get done, and whatever motions need to get on the agenda. So they share those items with Lori Bickert, who is your board secretary. She compiles and pulls things together. She collaborates with me. As a cabinet, we go over the agenda. And then whenever we've gone over the agenda, we send that to Dr. Wright to review the agenda as well. And then we'll have a conversation about it. She'll make sure that the things that she needs to see there are there. We'll talk about process, procedure, things like that. And then at some point on the next day, which is a Friday, we will get that over to the board and get it posted to the board portal. But it really is a collaborative process that starts with the board president and the superintendent, and then it kind of all gets built from there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other board comment? All right, so then we will move on to public to be heard. I'd like to start with the Zoom, since we started earlier today with people in public. So is there anyone on Zoom?
Yes. Tony, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself, then state your first and last name as well as your full address.
Hi, Tony Felino, Upper Providence Township, Village of Montclair. I find it hilarious that after the vote to remove masks, certain members of the board took their masks off. You would think that the purpose of the mask is to protect you from a virus. What other purpose would the mask have? Your actions, Karen, Maggie, Erica, Abby, and Diane, showed that it was purely political theater. Purely virtual signaling. You should be ashamed of yourselves. The kids deserve better than this. The school district deserves better than this. Political theater has no place in our district. As someone said earlier, all eyes are now on you. If you were leaders, you would have acted last week to remove the masks, but instead you were followers and made the kids suffer an extra week. I was pleased to see that 1210 AM radio took up the cause this week to remove the masks and stop abusing the kids. One of the radio show hosts called Maggie Wright Dr. Wrong. I suggest that each of you hold Maggie accountable for making the right decisions for the kids, not the wrong ones. Thank you.
Is there anyone else on Zoom?
Yes.
Thank you.
Lindsay, you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself and state your first and last name as well as your full address.
Lindsay Olanoski, Oaks, Pennsylvania. I want to apologize for my voice. I actually have kind of my first major cold in 2 years. It stinks. I'm not going to lie. I'm not enjoying it. It is also compliments of my son. And I mentioned that because we discussed what it means now to be mask optional. And in doing so, we told them, how do you feel? Where are your thoughts, et cetera. It's just sort of, getting the feel. It's been a long couple of years. And my son said to me, I'm going to wear mine. I still have a cold and I don't want to get my classmates sick. For what it's worth, he does know how to cough and sneeze into his elbow, wash his hands, et cetera. But I think it's really kind of telling that as miserable as this pandemic is, it has taught our children what it means to be a global citizen. It has taught them empathy and how to be conscious, both socially and health conscious for those around us. And, I am very, very personally excited to move forward from this pandemic through an endemic stage and really move on with the next level of our lives. But I also think it's really important that we remember that we are living in a global pandemic. This is truly something we have not seen in 100 years. And while we are all ready to move through it, and I say that myself, my child who I love and he was adorable and doesn't want to get his classmates sick, he's ready to not wear a mask either. And my daughter's ready to not wear a mask either. But But while we want to be done with COVID-19, we also have to respect the fact that this is truly a once in a generation event, and those sorts of events don't just disappear. So I have nothing but respect for everyone who's ready to move forward. We all are. But I simply ask that maybe look a little bit deeper for those kids, that maybe it's not simply I'm afraid to take off my mask, but simply I'm recognizing that right now my mask is still protecting other people. And for my son, he recognized that wearing a mask while he has a cold is protecting his classmates. And frankly, that's not a bad thing. That's something to be appreciative for. So just as we all move through this and work together to move through this, maybe let's not take it out on the little kids who are simply trying to be good global citizens. Thank you.
At this time, there are no further public comments to be heard on Zoom.
Okay, since there are no comments to be heard on Zoom, we will move to public comment.
Oh.
Hello, my name is Rudy Govan from Royersford. I know we spent this whole evening talking about masks and the pandemic and all those other things that we got going on here. But we have another pandemic in the Springford School District, and the pandemic is racism, and we need to handle it. I have my daughter who goes to the 8th grade center, who was berated, called a slave, a nigger, someone who needs to pick his cotton, and all these other things that were very, very racially demeaning in class in front of everyone else. And the student was sent home and suspended for 1 day and came back on Monday. You know, the kids have a little group chat, right? So a kid got on the group chat and said, hey, I'll be back on Monday. The pandemic we have in this school district is not mass. The pandemic we have in this school district is straight racism. Because I know if my son, who's in the 5th grade center, did that to any of the little white girls in that school, he would be expelled from the school district immediately. We as people of color do not get an opportunity or creative justice. We get prosecuted by the full extent of the law. My daughter has gone to mental health treatment for the abuse, the continued abuse that she has been receiving in the school district. I did not receive a phone call. I have not received anything from the school district, a call, crisis intervention, anything. Counseling wasn't recommended or asked. So we talk about masks and we talk about all these different things. We talked about, someone even brought up Nelson Mandela. Someone brought up Nelson Mandela when talking about masks. But are we really, really seeing what's going on? What's the tolerance? What's the tolerance? Because if my daughter would have punched him in the face due to the behavior that he was exhibiting, she would have been expelled. I done worked 25 plus years in law enforcement. I know exactly what we get. I know exactly what we get. Now everybody wants to stand here and look at me like, oh my God, I can't believe it happened. Not here. Yes. My daughter gets to the point where she doesn't want to go to school. She cries and wants to stay home because she just wants a day of relief from the racism and the abuse that is happening in that 8th grade center. Have not received one phone call. I talked to Mr. Rogers. I called him. He hasn't called me back. His answer was, oh, you should hear what his mother did not like that. I haven't received a phone call from the mother or anyone. That's our pandemic.
I'm terribly sorry that your daughter experienced that.
Okay, sir,
But this,
sir, thank you for your comment. And Mr. Rizzo, obviously, we can discuss, implications of board policy with regard to the concerns raised this evening.
thank you.
Mary Jo McNamara, Limerick, Pennsylvania. I was going to speak, I'm not. I'm just going to ask one thing, Mr. Rizzo, if you guys can make a plan to start to address the signage and stuff related to what your decision was earlier tonight. The go masking and the 6 feet apart and stuff like that, maybe rebrand it to make kids that want to wear masks inclusive to kids that don't want to wear masks, right? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rachel Kirchner, I don't know if it's say Upper Providence, to piggyback on what Mary Jo just said, and to answer Mr. Earl's question about the difference between what recommended versus just allowing somebody to do something, and also what Erica brought up. When you recommend something, you put it forward with approval to induce acceptance or favor. Looking at everybody right now, doesn't really look like you're recommending masks. So where your words have power, especially for these children who aren't used to not wearing a mask and feel like they're physically doing something wrong. So mean what you say and say what you mean. If you're allowing masks to be worn, you're allowing masks not to be worn, then the language should match. And addressing potentially adding another mask mandate or metrics. I just want to call attention to the fact that throughout this entire time, the metric that we use to determine, or what you use to determine whatever mitigation strategies would be in place, based on what you said, Mr. Reza, you said there's no real science behind the 100,000 number and no research to support this. And I think it's kind of scary that nobody ever said, do we have any research about this? Has anybody said, you know, has anybody heard anything? It's kind of concerning. And what's also concerning is that I did bring it up in one of the many emails that I've sent you all. And I got 0 responses regarding the metrics that you used, and 0 thoughts. And yes, I was trying to engage discussion and conversation because you guys are unreachable. You're making decisions for my child. And when I email you, you don't email me back. And when I have questions and concerns, they're not valid because who knows if you even read them. So if you're representing your community and your community is concerned about something, and if that concern is about their child and the decision that you're making for them, I would really appreciate if you could just write a sister back, all right? I spend a lot of time and energy putting these together. And I would appreciate that in return. Thanks.
Michael Lebajinsky, Limerick, real quick. Don't expect an answer tonight, but I would like a follow-up on this Act 91. Is anyone familiar with Act 91? I understand that it's supposed to be legislation to address shortage of teachers by lowering the standards so that teachers without the proper certifications can come into our school district and educate our kids. I understand, sounds like a lofty goal to address a shortage, but concerned about the lowering of the standards part. Real quick on COVID, Mr. Rizzo's presentation was excellent as usual. One thing for the county, Mr. Rizzo, tomorrow, I'm still trying to process the woman who spoke before about the kid in the classroom who's sick and using the mask to protect other kids. I'm not sure why we'd have a sick child in class. Anyway, here nor there. So in the conference call with Monco tomorrow, if you could ask about incidental COVID. So you mentioned that the future numbers that the CDC may use are going to be cases and hospitalizations. So Dr. Richard Lorraine has stated in email that they're struggling with this incidental COVID. So this is where someone goes in the hospital for a gunshot wound or goes in the hospital because they fell and they happen to test positive for COVID. That's counted as a COVID hospitalization. Obviously, that's going to skew the numbers. Shouldn't be surprising as the spread goes up. Hospitalizations go up, not because people are there with COVID hospitalized. It's because COVID is prevalent in society. We get the same exact number of people going to the hospitals. I look at the census data all the time. Einstein Montgomery, for example, has had pretty much exactly the same census for the last 2 years. So this myth of overwhelming the hospitals is a little crazy. Yeah, I don't even think we're going to actually just scratch that, Mr. Rizzo. We're not going to need that because the Commonwealth Court's going to rule here, and we're not going to have a health and safety plan with any mandates in the future. Thank you.
Right, if there's no more public comment to be heard, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second? Meeting adjourned.